Other than that, we are super, super excited today to kickstart Design Dekko Season 2. And we have titled this year's conference Design for Thought. There's a lot of thought that's gone into it, in fact. And it's basically been a series of many, many conversations between Sneha and me over the months. And what stems from, and this is something that we talked about yesterday during our Insta Live, it stems from a sort of two journeys that we've had respectively that have been very similar and have intersected at various points. We've connected, we've crossed paths, but we've never really had the opportunity to work together. And this time when Godrej came up with Design Dekko, and we thought it was a great platform to explore and to talk about certain things that we had been actually discussing and questioning for ourselves. Both of us are from the design sort of community, and but from very different sort of backgrounds, right? Like Supreet said, Sneha is a writer who got into design. I'm an architect who got into writing. So we both come from, we come to the same point, but from different directions. And I think that's what's been really interesting. And Design for Thought is a culmination of that. And the idea, again, being to question, to sort of scratch this, to go deeper beyond the surface, and to look at some of the things that are prevalent today, that have been prevalent in the community, and things that we've been talking about, looking inwards and really kind of reflecting on the process behind the product or the end result. Sneha, please chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Sneha,
think,
can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me? I hope
Yes.
everyone can hear me well.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, Mrinalini. Thank you so much for those gracious words and that lovely introduction to Design for Thought. All I want to add to that is, we're really grateful for the speakers who said yes immediately to be a part of the session, and it felt so nice for them to resonate with what we were feeling in that moment. And there was no better time to put this series of conversations together, because this is not meant to be revolutionary. We're just kind of wanting to ask honest questions, and really set the table for open conversations. At the end of the day, it's about, like Supreet said, and like Supreet was talking about, it's about the little things we do and the little things that matter. And on that note, can we have the video, please? Yeah, we're just going to play a small video before we originally kickstart with our first session of the day. We're just waiting for the video to play. There we go.
We are Godrej. That's us in ruby, green, and blue. And this is a story of the things we do. It started with a little thing we made to protect you and your things. Over 100 years on, we're still doing the same, except it now has wings. Little things that'll take you places you can't get to on an airplane. And little things that circle the earth and tell our farmers when it'll rain. Little things that keep our animal friends hale and hearty. And little things that keep kids healthy and naughty. Little things that keep not just our homes, but even medicines and vaccines cool. And little things that rinse away dirt and allergens, so your little ones don't miss a day of school. Little things that make washing hands so much fun. And some that make your cars and homes smell like spring. Little things that keep diseases away. And some that make your hair shine and swing. Little things that help you make things. Big, small, and everything in between. And little things that help carry those things to places far and even unseen. Little things, or should we say little spaces, where you live, work and play. And little things things you keep in those spaces? To sit, sleep, or just put things away? Locks, soaps, buildings and missiles. Well, there are quite a few. These are some of the little things. The little things we do.
All right, the little things we do, but with big perspectives, big hopes, big dreams. And on that note, I'm pleased to announce the first session of today. It's called Can We Challenge the Phygital? In design and architecture, the gap between physical and digital spaces is narrowing, and yet the chasm remains considerable. So how does one bridge this? Perhaps by exploring, identifying, and creating opportunities that can be exploited for larger problem solving, higher productivity, and greater achievements. Pranali, why don't you introduce our two lovely speakers for this session?
Sorry, I was muted. We are very, very excited today to have two very prominent speakers with us. So I'll start with Tapio. Tapio is a Finnish designer, innovator, and artist who has been working with light as a medium for design collaborations, digital interventions, product innovation, and art since 1998. He founded Lighting Design Collective, also known as LDC, in 2009. He co-created Think a Tank in 2014 and co-founded Scandal Technologies in 2016, among many other things that he's done. His work seeks to create a tangible connection between artificial light, media, digital futures, and the human experience. He is a pioneer in the use of biomimetic and responsive lighting control in built environments, and continues to develop systems, master plans, visions, and technologies related to this field. Tapio is tuning in today all the way from Madrid. And we are also joined by none other than Ayaz Basrai, who graduated in industrial design, specializing from, he set up the Bus Ride, which is a studio with his architect brother Zamir. It's an independent design studio specializing in the design and creation of built environments, ranging from hospitality and entertainment to film and production environments, exhibitions, installations, institutional and architectural environments. A diverse team of architects, interior and industrial designers, they look for solutions from the macro to the micro, from the slightly mad to the totally insane. Ayaz currently heads the studio's research arm, the Bus Ride Lab in Goa, which works with heritage conservation and futures research at the intersection of technology, design, and art. And Ayaz is tuning in from Goa today. So we've got these two brilliant minds who are going to be talking to us about how and whether we can challenge the phygital. So perhaps let's start talking about what is the phygital, right? This seems to be a term that has suddenly become quite popular. It's catching on. People are curious about it. A lot of people are exploring this area. And we know that as technology gets more and more advanced, the role of design and that of the designer is changing. Phygital design offers experiences that not only delight, but also meet the needs of the situation and the environment by facilitating interactions. So a very warm welcome to both of you, and a poignant, I would say, question to start the chat today. Tapio and Ayaz, a very, very welcome to our session today.
Thank you very much.
Tapio, can we get your video on?
Yeah, the host needs to enable me to share my video.
So please, can we get Tapio's video on, please?
Okay, now it's coming.
Oh,
hi there.
You are.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, what is phygital? There you go.
Yeah, tell us all about this world.
Well, I think it's very important that we don't even try to tell all about it, because we would be here for 6 months. But I think maybe the best thing I do about it is that, or to think about it and conceptualize it together, is that right now is an opportunity to essentially define what it is from your kind of own activity and from your own industry and from your own approach, it's very much kind of up for grabs, because the term itself, I mean, primarily comes from retail. I mean, it's in the retail world where you hear it most. But for example, the way we've been approaching it for now, let's say intuitively for almost 20 years, it's very little to do with retail, and it's much more to do with kind of experiences that share these ideas like immediacy and immersion, and these kinds of elements that the digital layer in the built environment allows for. So it's digital is in my view most of all about enabling. So it enables new kind of experiences, new kind of services, new kind of approaches, and gets very interesting when you begin to apply it to the built environment, which is one expression of the physical, just one little one, but it's just one of many. That's how I would begin to define it.
Ayaz, would you like to add something about how that is being used and how that is kind of applied and is relevant within the Indian context and the work that you're doing these days?
Sure. In fact, one really interesting way of thinking about this, I've been kind of interested in this real and virtual kind of, spectrum for a while, actually. Sort of back in 2003, I worked on a thesis project which aimed to kind of learn from some of the emerging grammar of the internet and bringing it into physical space. So this was in 2003. And so, I mean, at that time, cutting edge technology was like, ICQ chat and Yahoo Messenger, which is, some form of archaeology right now. But it's a very interesting sort of construct to look at it as a spectrum, that you have a large spectrum of experiences where you have, on one side, you have the purely brick and mortar digital, and the other side, you have the fully ephemeral, the immediate, the simultaneous, on that side. And then what's really interesting for design and architecture to kind of consider is if you ascribe values to those parts of the spectrum. So say, like earlier, people ascribed value in a library to the brick and mortar, but now one can actually see a massive shift in terms of what the completely virtual enables. So, like, what is the kind of real-time documentation of a library? I mean, all these kind of things are enabled by the completely ephemeral, but they enter a value system that is now shared between the physical and the digital. So I think, if one can see or place certain experiences on spectrums and then blur those boundaries as much as possible, it becomes a really interesting construct to, start engaging with. So yeah, that's my confused thoughts on it.
I think and to add to the kind of the idea of value, which is incredible, in this context, I think that's probably why the most interest right now is so intense. It is because we are beginning to shift value. We begin to allow value to shift to digital, and there's so many dramatic examples of it. And like everything in this life always starts in the arts, and arts is the great
the Formula One industry
laboratory. Yeah. So if you now look at what's going on in the arts and you look at the NFT craze, and people are buying 3D architecture built in mass, and they're paying real money for it. They're paying hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to be able to be the owner of this digital asset. So we're kind of very literally shifting value there. And then there's the other one, which comes always with value, is meaning, isn't it? Like if there wasn't no meaning, then there would be no value. So I'm very interested, kind of like, it's interesting to observe and also trying to trying to contribute to this idea of how you create meaning. You create meaning in a built environment, let's say in an architecture or interior, through digital intervention. And what we already begin to see a little bit is then how the physical is begin to create meaning inside the digital.
Really, I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, just to kind of bring this idea of meaning, it's so interesting that you have these artworks like the famous, I think, the Black Square. It's called the Kazimir Malevich kind of super minimal white canvas with a black square. I mean, one can actually stare at it for hours and hours and really think about meaning. Like, I mean, every single value that's been ascribed to that art is purely discourse. So it's actually off the canvas. It doesn't exist on the canvas as such. It actually is the entire meaning exists in what your relationship with that canvas is. And we kind of ran this interesting thought experiment in the studio where we were imagining that you walk into an art gallery, and what confronts you is say 25 paintings which all look the same, but the story behind each of the paintings is different. So say one is designed by a paraplegic war veteran who's painted the entire thing with like a brush in his mouth, and but what value would you ascribe to that piece of art? And then when you go to the next one, it's a created by AI, and it's a complete digital copy of something which is pre-existing. So they could even be 20 Mona Lisas, but the discourse below that of what like would certain art forms purely based on the story that accompanies the artwork, or the kind of virtual value that one could ascribe to that art, would that change the value of the art, for example?
Yeah, the value of narrative. Yeah. Which is, I think, again, it's a great example, which can be applied quite directly to design world, and to kind of environmental design, to architectural design, to product design, to anything is the value of narrative, which in itself is old, but the new thing is that the narrative value comes from the digital world, right?
Absolutely.
So it can be layered in, and it can suddenly dramatically change everything about an object. And an object could be a building, so an object in urban context. So I think that's one of the maybe more kind of straightforward examples of digital. Is applying a new narrative to an existing built infrastructure by digital means. That's already digital. And very much doable.
There's also like a few interesting. I mean, you can actually excavate a lot of these ideas through like certain disciplinary anxieties, right? So like I know for a fact that in India we have this huge anxiety right now of relevance. I mean, I think architecture, interior design. I mean, in the age of Pinterest, really, what is our contribution to culture, right? I mean, if you actually say manage to get out of the way, okay, and say that architects are actually not there to solve a problem; they're the reason the problem exists, and we are actually more speed bumps. And not really, solving any issue, which is statistically completely true. I mean, if one had to say create a Pinterest to contracting ecosystem, where architects actually just get out of the way and enable culture to build their own homes, and I think Katia and a combination of a bunch of purely digital platforms will do a much better job of kind of housing society. And then there are these deep anxieties, so like if then we have to look for meaning, we tend to look for that meaning in age-old, like heritage kind of monuments. So conservation becomes a very important bit because, we've studied in our 60s modernist kind of educational framework where all our student projects are, campuses for the furthering of the arts and stuff like that. But then when you actually come into practice, you're given like a shop in a mall to design. So there are deep anxieties, like, that this is really what my self-image is as an architect, and I need to be doing all these kind of socially uplifting things. But actually, I'm designing a high-end retail store in some, fancy mall. So I think then we look for relevance in, these age-old constructs like heritage and craft, which then, almost explains this whole crafto scene. I think this term was coined recently by Superflux in London. So they talk about this whole sort of shifting of, everyone's perception is now in craft, and we're trying to draw value from that domain because it's of its age-old kind of construct.
It's comforting. It's comfort, isn't it?
Exactly. To be surrounded by something that's so old.
Because we're faced now by disruption, and the kind of classic roles of architects are being questioned. And now, if you look at, for example, the word architecture is applied in such a wide variety of ways. And for example, in our world, people talk about system architecture, the system architects, and I think that's one very good future for the architects is that start creating enabling systems and that allows architecture to happen, but in a very, very, very kind of new way, is that your role is no longer to be the one on top of the pyramid, but rather you are the one building the base for the pyramid, and everybody is on the top, sort of thing. So okay, but so it's that anxiety of the future, and now the like the metaverse that is inevitable and coming with a vengeance requires a lot of architecture. It requires urban planning. It requires social architecture. It requires system architecture. It requires, experiential architecture. All these different architectures are now required in a very different new way, in a very different new context. And I might be wrong, but my conservative guess would be that 99.99999% of the architects are not involved. Like they are not involved in building that world.
Tapio,
and it's being built now. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's weirdly comforting is that architects are actually not even involved in 95% of real world projects.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's true, actually. Hey. Yeah. That's true.
I'm going to take objection to that, considering
that is thought-provoking in a way.
It's statistically true. Like I think the Royal Institute of British Architects published these results. That I think there were some 66,000 entries for a Guggenheim museum in Oslo, some crazy amount of people, and there's only 5% of buildings in the UK which are being constructed by architects. 95% is being constructed by public works engineers, civil engineers. That's why our cities look the way they do, right? I mean, it's not like architects are doing some crazy public-facing work. It's all mostly, high-value private apartments which are being constructed right now.
Yeah, in Madrid during the financial crisis after 2008, it was sort of popular amongst the architects to start kind of cupcake shops and things like that. They became the ultimate architects of kind of hipsterism and sort of gentrifying certain parts of town with.
That's amazing. I'm going to set up my own cupcake shop in Goa for sure.
I'm feeling the pressure to kind of defend this profession a little bit, considering I'm the only architect on the panel right now. So guys,
I'm an industrial designer.
It's easy for you. You kind of slip in really easily over there, especially with your studio, right? And it's interesting how the kind of work that you're doing, it actually kind of you're sitting, I won't say sitting on the fence, but you're straddling various worlds.
But
right?
being on the fence, actually.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with you. And so I'm actually curious to see and ask you how, we are talking about the phygital and we are talking about the future, but how does the phygital really facilitate that future that we are looking at, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it very conceptually and in a cloud, but how does that really translate into work on the ground?
Well, we could take an example. I mean, I think actually there were a couple of images with the craft work that we were sort of working on. So, I mean, this is maybe an example of how one could look at traditional Indian craft and create a scaffolding in VR, for that content to live on in a separate, a completely separate narrative. So, so this is actually based on measure drawings of temples, right? So this is these are photogrammetric artifacts from temples in Madurai. So they've been actually captured in a fairly low poly kind of environment, and they then are arrayed and played around with in pure virtual space. And you actually realize that now you don't have the constraint of gravity to build a temple, right? There's no need to actually respond to a gravitational construct. So you can actually now you're freed by the mathematics, or you're freed by a pure virtual expression, and then you play around with materiality and all that. So I think now what happens to this artifact is interesting, right? This artifact could now become a 3D printed object, so it goes back into the kind of the realm of the physical. It could become a completely virtual artifact, which is then reappropriated into a digital shrine, for example. It could become part of a gaming environment, so people actually create a completely new relationship with temple architecture in a very, very playful way, where you can actually navigate a three-dimensional globe as a temple. So I think one of the maybe coming back to the where we started this conversation around the idea of value, right? Like that, if you had to say create a new set of relationships with religious monuments, or you have to create a new set of relationships with the old built environment. I mean, they don't necessarily need to be playing on the same terms. You can change the playground and bring in ideas of digital worship, or bring in ideas of, like, I mean, say for example in what Tapio's referring to as the metaverse. Temples may not be facsimile copies of the temples that exist in the real world today. They could be algorithmic explorations of the same base geometry of a real world temple, but that temple could be being constructed and deconstructed in real time, where the focus comes back on the algorithm and not so much on the built form or the materiality of it. So I think, if you're, say, imagining walking through the Taj Mahal and seeing every single tessellation that is being used in that Taj Mahal jumping up and down in VR, timed to, say, Drupad music, right? I mean, imagine the kind of experience of that temple, and it almost makes the physical world feel, like the Taj Mahal is probably the most boring monument to visit after you've been into that kind of experience, right? So I think it's really where you place value on the spectrum of the physical to the virtual. This is from the Tazias in Jaipur, actually. So we worked off, some amazing measure drawings done by Ayush Kasliwal's studio in Jaipur, and he had documented the making of the Tazias for Muharram. So we took those base geometries and then converted them into a VR artifact. So these are things that you can actually engage with in a completely different way from the original Tazias, which are actually destroyed at the end of Muharram.
Yeah, it is in one hand you're touching onto the augmentation of experience, and I think that again is one of those things that finally now starts to be around the corner. I mean, the augmented experience, the creative side of augmented experience, been kind of a long time coming, but the hardware has been lagging behind. So we don't really have kind of comfortable glasses, AR glasses, and stuff like that. But they are now sort of about to come. I think Apple pushed the Apple glasses release now to, is it Q3 next year? So that is probably sort of a very immediate moment for the world where suddenly the digital becomes very tangible, becomes very understandable, because you literally see that augmentation going around you, and it will be used in such a variety of ways, from healthcare to retail to anything. So until that comes, I think we're all still kind of exploring with a certain level of abstraction, because it is not, it doesn't feel so real. But then there's the other augmentation, which is going back to a little bit like what we're talking about, things like the narrative value and stuff like that, is that you can also augment digitally without glasses, without layering. And there's a whole nother school of thought that started in the mid-90s, which is about the kind of sort of information receding to the environment, and the architecture begins to provide you with information that you need and services that you need. And we were involved in a research in Finland with a very Finnish attitude style research that it was called the naked approach. And the nakedness in this instance referred to the fact that you're naked from technology, because particularly at the time there was a lot of talk about wearables, and this, you know, AR glasses are wearables, and this measured me and all these kind of things. And it was and still is kind of going to a direction where we become the sort of Christmas trees that carry enormous amounts of technology on us. And we have a intelligent smart hat and a smart shirt and a smart glasses and a smart watch. And is that okay? Like, do we want that? Are people gonna adopt that? The naked approach is that you don't. You are natural. You are you. We are human. We are biological beings. And then all that recedes to the built environment and gets like embeds into architecture. So is the different dimension of augmentation.
It's lovely.
Well, we'll see, but no one. I mean, let's see what happens.
I'm finding your conversation, Ayaz and Tapio, so interesting, because phygital to me as a concept before you all introduced it was really alien to me. I think it was just limited to, like Tapio said, retail design, or it was limited to NFTs, something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And I can see Raghava KK here, maybe he can offer a perspective too. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about two spectrums of the responsibility of design and the responsibility of designer. One spectrum is something that Ayaz mentioned already, about of a certain kind of craft and heritage of craft. And the other spectrum is to just push the envelope of experience, customer experience, as well as storytelling, whether it's through retail design, whether it's through spatial design, or whether it's beyond that. So I wanted to understand from you, what, I mean, I don't think it's about drawing the line anymore. I think I've learned that it's not about, from your conversation, not about drawing the line. It's kind of like trying to mesh the two in some way. But it'd be great if you can answer your responsibility as designers, as well as what is the end goal, whether it's for the consumer or whether it's for someone else. Please feel free to comment.
Well, I don't think it's for digital as a whole. It's not for any vertical, and it's not for any target group. It's so permissive. I mean, it's just one of those things, is that we are kind of like, internet was very difficult to define even in the 90s, kind of like, what is it for?
Yeah.
And now if the Wi-Fi stops, it's worse than if the water stops.
Yeah. So
in your office. So if the water stops, you can stay working for 8 hours. If the Wi-Fi stops, you go home.
That's true.
So it has now like permitted. It's absolutely like all around us. Literally, we are just like embedded in internet, like we are now. So it's going to be like that, in my opinion. Is that it's this openness of it is absolutely open-ended, and it will become a new expression of world with its heritages, with its cultures, with its interactions, with everything. I mean, I wouldn't be. I mean, if you look back in history and you think about this, kind of the anthropology, whatever, but I mean, it would seem very logical, for example, that we would have a war on metaverse.
Yeah.
Some kind of conflict between states, where one is trying to block the access of the other, or I could really see all that quite easily, and then also all the good stuff. But so it's editing and everything, which makes it so kind of exciting, but equally abstract. It's hard to pin it, and then and then there's this kind of angle to it. Is like if you think about experience, then it's another sort of such a mega trend is that the experience economy is getting to a point is that experience economy is the economy. Is that it has starting, like everything is sold through experience. Everything is kind of these values and attached through experiences. Like millennials, who by the way now are 40 years old. Remember this? Yeah. So millennials are now 40. So they're not kids. So they're middle-aged. So these middle-aged people spend tremendous amount of more for experiences than for goods. So that shift happened, and now the next crowd coming through are like so native in that. They're so native, and they're so ready to attach value and buy things online and buy these experiences and just live through it. So I can see them living their life like with metaverse, like the same way we're living our lives with internet. So the metaverse and the internet, it becomes the same thing, and it's just essential part of our lives, like water is and food is and everything else. But it doesn't exclude. It doesn't mean that we become zombies with boxes in our heads at all. I don't believe in that kind of dystopia at all.
It's also kind of interesting. There's this like sort of a shifting target between like earlier sort of where we drew a value system from, where say, I mean, back in time, if it came from say the prophets or from religion or from purely virtual constructs like the word from a book essentially, and then that manifested in cities like Florence, and it almost like spawned from the Bible. Like this built architecture that is almost an eulogy to scripture, and now with sort of new forms of identity making. Like, I mean, you have almost all of us is schizophrenic in some ways. Like you have an online personality or an offline personality. You'll be communicating differently on say Twitter. You'll be communicating differently on Instagram. You'll have different kinds of. So I mean, I think slowly we're evolving into a multiple identity species. Which, and all these identities are very important. Like I've been to very young gatherings where people have introduced themselves as their Instagram handles. Like okay, this guy is this guy is that guy, and this guy. So this is already happening. And I mean, one can look at it with a little bit.
They don't sound like millennials, Ayaz.
I don't know.
Probably be Gen Z or
yeah. It's a thing, I mean, you lead with your Instagram handle, like, okay, this guy is that guy. Oh man, I love your work. So there is currency there. I mean, there is value and currency there for sure in the pure virtual kind of virtual part of ourselves that we put out there. And what's interesting is now to see what a schizophrenic society actually becomes eventually. I don't mean schizophrenic in a bad way. I mean, not in the sort of medical disorder way, but more in a situation where you are holding multiple identities, and all of them may be very enabling. Like some of them may be mixed gender identities, some of them may be very liberating identities. Where you can choose to re-affiliate as well. you could sort of have a second life in the virtual world. And eventually, I mean, I think there was also an anxiety of bringing back those kind of ideas into the real world. I mean, that was the role of the shaman in traditional societies, right? I mean, this person would obviously pop a lot of psychedelics and smoke magic herbs, and then go off into the dream world and bring back a value system, or bring back deep memories of the tribe, saying, okay, that this is when drought occurs, and this is when the birds are the sort of intestines of the bird taste a particular way. That's when you shift the tribe from one place to the next. So, but I mean, right now we're actually navigating the same kind of virtual environment through our kind of split personalities, and we don't necessarily need to bring that value back, because now there is enough to be built in the virtual world.
It's new. Exactly. You attach new meanings and new values, and I don't think we need to hang on to the past. Can I share my screen very quickly?
Yes, of course.
Sure, go ahead, Tapio.
Because I thought that it helps when we talk about kind of visual things, might be a little bit easier for people to see a few quick things. So I just wanted to show this because there's an interesting kind of bridge effect here. So this was a digital layer, this very early prototyping of Phygital. So we did this about
We are Godrej. That's us in ruby, green and blue. And this is a story of the little things we do. It started with a little thing we made to protect you and your things. Over 100 years on, we're still doing the same. Except it now has wings.
Lift off.
Little things that will take you places. You can't get to on an airplane. And little things that circle the earth and tell our farmers when it'll rain. Little things that keep our animal friends hale and hearty. And little things that keep kids healthy and naughty. Little things that keep not just our homes, but even medicines and vaccines cool. And little things that rinse away dirt and allergens, so your little ones don't miss a day of school. Little things that make washing hands so much fun. And some that make your cars and homes smell like
Be there in the next session. In fact, he talks a lot about phygital in his work as well. And he's been doing a lot of artwork in that space and recently very successfully sold with Sotheby's. So yeah, that's some really, so you guys should stick on for the next sessions and chime in there too. But Ayaz, good to see you still standing. Or maybe
Yeah,
I should not remind you.
I took a small 5-minute break.
Just a couple more minutes so that we can restore all our lost live links and allow people to come back in.
So Tapio, I went for a short trek with my son on my shoulders for like 40 minutes of walking, and I'm like on bed rest for the last 5 days now.
Yeah, have to be careful. Yeah, we're not millennials anymore.
You were literally carrying the weight of the future on your shoulders, huh? Yeah.
Oh man!
Wow.
Oh man! I wish he saw it that way. He's like, "Well, what's up, man? Let's go out. Let's do this. Let's do that."
I'm sure he wishes you saw it that way, man.
Yeah, I think should we start, and while people come in, they will add their questions. Yeah.
Tapio, you want to start? Do you want to try sharing your screen again?
Yeah, I don't know exactly at which point we fell off. But
why don't you had just
sharing
started to
screen,
talk
yeah.
about the project? I think this was
okay.
the Silos project.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me do that.
While you share, Supreet or Ayumi, can we get a confirmation whether we are now live on the other platforms? Because we have a massive audience.
Yes, we are live, Mrinal.
Okay, perfect. Then we're good to go. Excellent.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was just talking about this because it's an kind of like a historical example. So this is 10 years ago, an attempt to layer digital information into a physical existing industrial structure. So this is an oil tank, disused oil tank. And the light, in this case, acts as the digital layer. And the idea is that it makes something that's invisible, like temperature or wind speeds or wind directions and stuff like that, allows them to become visible kind of mood generators in a built environment. So that was interesting. And then that created a new meaning. The digital created a new meaning, and then the overall project created a new meaning where people, now they might get married there, or they could do all sorts of different events. So suddenly an oil tank becomes, almost like a place of ritual. They use it for events, of course, and things like that. So one year there was the Helsinki Fashion Week, and because of that event, that particular group, that particular vertical, took it kind of like for themselves, which is great. And that created, again, another layer of meaning. And that then trickled into something called Digital Village, which is a metaverse that's currently being built by the company called Digital Village. And because of that link to the Fashion Week, now that that originally physical industrial structure appears in a completely different context in a metaverse, and you can hold events there when you can go and visit and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to show this very quickly because there's this interesting kind of like origin of linking real-time data and digital information to create meaning in a physical infrastructure, and now the physical infrastructure through his own life has then started to create new meanings in the metaverse. And I think we're going to start seeing this back and forth quite a lot. And it kind of creates this, cybernetic loop, where the famous one is where you essentially, your built environment influences the digital environment, which then shifts things in the physical environment, which then influences your behavior, which then influences the physical environment again, or the digital environment, and so it goes. So we are beginning to, I think, start the era of so-called real-time environments, and there's that real-time immediacy, the three I's, the immediacy, immersion, and interaction. They're coming from the digital world into the built environment, but then they are feeding back into it. So the loop is there. So I thought that's kind of worth throwing into the conversation. I can stop that.
So I actually had a question here. It's really interesting that you brought this up with respect to what's happening real time, right? And this is happening more and more even now, especially in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic. People are sitting at home and they're sort of, in a way, they are counting on the virtual world to give them the experiences that they would have otherwise had. Case in point, all of us today, right? We're sitting and talking to each other from across the world, different parts of the country. You're in Madrid, we're all over the place. But we're being able to do this, and the digital space has enabled that. My question is that, are we looking at how, let's say, the past kind of represents the physical, the present represents the phygital, and the future is going to represent the digital? And if that is the case, then are we, like, I might sound a little pessimistic about this or skeptical, but are we heading towards what, like this very sort of innate environment where we are only going to engage with each other virtually, almost like a WALL-E, the movie sort of syndrome? I might be trivializing it a little bit, but is there that kind of concern somewhere, maybe?
Well, I mean, the dystopia is always it's always the attractive we option. Like, we as humans seem to be very inclined.
But we do romanticize everything on the other hand as well, right?
Some do. I do. But I think we're going to see a bit of everything, aren't we? Because one of the largest metaverses currently being built with the most money is built by Facebook, and which is currently the Resident Evil. So it's kind of hard to say. So there'll be the evil metaverse, and then there'll be lots of underground metaverses and anarchist metaverses and the hippie metaverses, and so like the world itself. So I don't believe at all to the ideas that we would be satisfied as a human race, spending our lives online and only socializing online and somehow like losing the physical aspect of ourselves. I genuinely don't think that would ever become a reality in a general way. Of course, it can happen to individuals, but I don't think there's that risk. It makes no sense because we are more than our brains. So quite the contrary, I'm expecting the multisensorial aspect and things are becoming more valuable. And in argument now is also that, like you just said, is that we're looking for experiences. And what has happened during the COVID, for example, is that finally this sort of emergence of very strong experiential environments. If you look at the work of Team Lab coming out of Japan, and if you look at some of the other, if you look at what's going on in Expert 2020 Dubai, the very immersive experiences, and incredibly popular. So people are responding to it, like they're really going for it, because it gives. I think because it gives you that. It's not just screen based, but it's still also quite digital.
There's some interesting output. There's obviously limited channels with which you can actually have undiluted output to kind of represent some of these arguments, right? So some of the work that we've been trying to do in speculative fiction is kind of interesting. That that you look at a hypothetical year in the future, which is in our case 2035, and in fact there are just two slides that I would like to just use as a prompt. Sneha, the last two slides in the presentation, which are it's actually this idea of how you can actually calculate how many animals that you've eaten in, say, the last month, which could be collated from your restaurant bills. I'm just wondering if you could pull up that slide, Sneha. There was it's essentially an like an AR filter that allows I think it's slide number one of them. I think it's slide number 5. Yeah, this guy. So this poor guy, walking around the street, and he's followed by an AR filter that actually, documents all the animal lives that he's taken in the last month. So, how many eggs he's eaten, how many chickens he's eaten, a few goats. And it's kind of interesting that you have a embedded ethics system that is made very visible in your data, and the stuff that you actually that you have already in some weird way consumed. But when it's made visible through an AR filter or through some form of output in the physical world, it tends to become a bit creepy. And so I mean, we kind of some of the imagery that we're trying to create in the studio kind of skirts on this line, where you're saying that, okay, this is something that you've actually done. How can you make it visible in the creepiest way possible? But it's still really nice, sweet, playful icons and things like that. And there's another interesting one, which is, I think, on slide number 4, which is, if say man and machine or the physical and the digital had to collaborate in a very meaningful way, and what would that look like? So if you actually look at, say, a machine learning algorithm that has been trained on a massive database of Mughal tessellation, right? So learning tessellations is actually something fairly, much easier for a machine learning algorithm to pick up than training, say, like a marble inlay craftsman. And what happens is you have a series of drones that are now precision guided by the algorithm, which does the outline for the inlay, and then you have human labor that fills in the semi-precious stone. And so there is a symbiosis here somewhere to be discovered, right? Like there is if each of us plays to our strengths, like what's the best that the physical environment could offer us and what's the best that the digital environment could offer us. And if both are working to their full potential, there is, in this case, a certain symbiosis between what the human being should not lose control of, right? And the kind of augmentation that could be provided by an algorithmic scaffolding, right? So I think these are the kind of hybrid experiments that we're going to start seeing a lot more of. In terms of I mean, our fascination with it is in a very mundane, everyday kind of a way. So the imagery that is put out is not like fancy glossy renderings. It's like an everyday situation. There's still a plastic bucket on the scaffolding. So it's not existing in some kind of hypothetical environment. It's things that we can assume that we're going to start seeing around us. But this is a pure merger of how sort of frameworks from the digital could actually start coming into real world experiences and actually adding value. Not replacing skills, but actually augmenting, creating new expressions, for example.
Exactly that. There's a school of thought on that, which is this kind of like a assisted concept, that AI doesn't take over, it assists, and it is one way to ease the fear, because we're all that anxiety, the ideas that you're just talking about. I mean, and it's very, very noticeable, and there's a lot of fear. If you look at the way the kind of entertainment or popular media is dealing with these topics, they are always from the perspective of fear.
There was this. Sorry.
Yeah, no. But it is. I think what you're describing is it's kind of like more boring than the dystopian robots take over. But it's much more true. It's much more the case is that we always had that. We've always had assisted. The wheel. Or the spade. We've always created tools that assist us to create new things.
And so one more really interesting kind of observation on this bit, right? Because if you look at the way humans use tools, what happens is our consciousness flows into those tools, right? So if you're an artist and you're holding a 6-inch paintbrush, what's actually happening is that your neurology is considering the paintbrush to be an extension of your brain, and that is allowing you to actually submit to the kind of vagaries of the paper, to how, say, ink is blotting in a wet medium. And like that's why actually when you say driving a car and you get into a very low garage, you duck your head, because your head and the top of the car is actually now one entity, neurologically speaking, because your consciousness flow. That's why you can actually navigate roads and all that. So it's a very well understood, neuroscientific kind of phenomenon. But what's really interesting is now with virtual tools, right? When you look up into the sky and you can get a real-time feed from the Hubble telescope, looking at the birth and death of galaxies. Like, I mean, what does that do to our neurology? It's going to make us very different beings. It's going to make us, if you can look, like a zillion light years back in time and look at these kind of, spectral events that have completely been opaque to civilization the way we knew it till now. You can see in infrared, and you can see in all these kind of frequencies that have been forever. I think there's this massive merger that is there somewhere in the horizon, which is actually going to create the superhumans or the next step in terms of our own evolution. Very interesting.
Yeah, the augmentation, the supervision, like through augmentation, you see it through walls. Yeah.
I'm going to bring in Raghav here.
Hello.
Hey guys. I'm so excited to hear all this conversation. I'm sorry I'm jumping in a little earlier than my session, but just to add to what you guys were saying, about 4 years ago, my brother and I went through an emotional crisis. I went through a divorce, and he too. And we end up in India. He's an econometrics professor, and I'm an artist who quit formal education. And the two of us meet in India, and we wrote a paper out of complete loss of faith in everything, and some sort of a nihilistic point of view. We wrote this paper called Transcendence for the Post-Human Age, where we argue that man did not make tools, tools equally designed man. So therefore, it's a symbiotic relationship. And we see tools as tools of transcendence, therefore. So man hopes to become the next version of himself using accessible tools, right? And then if you look at these as tools of transcendence, it turns out that any act of transcendence, change, has three emotions that come with it simultaneously. Now we're looking at religions for inspiration, and it turns out mysterium tremendum e fascinans, which is loss, liberation, and mystery at the same time. So fear, anxiety, insecurity comes from the loss of our humanity with every tool we invent. So there is fear, as Tapio rightly pointed out. And then the second emotion we feel is we also feel this awe, we are liberated. When I went through divorce, a part of me died, but also a part of me was alive, because I was like, dude, you're free. Who do you want to be? Like, it's really scary because we very often are just responding to the environment, not designing or playing with it. So there's this liberation. And the third emotion, which is very underexplored academically in every way, is mystery. How do we accept the fact that we're going to surprise ourselves? How do we accept the fact that we can never know who we're going to become? And so that requires spiritual pursuits, understanding the ingredient X in a utility function that actually destroys the function. So, so what was fascinating was everything you're saying. We had written out a thesis where we were offering the contemporary global world an alternate philosophy from the East. And when I say West and East, I think this is the time for us to dance, because the West was brilliant at taking the whole apart, breaking it into its opposing components, binaries, and then studying the evolution of these binaries or the individual parts. And the Eastern world has offered multiple metaphors for bringing back these pieces together. We understood how the duck's beak, claws, tail evolved. But what about the duck? What about the duck? So that's where we have been researching multiple alternate philosophies for reconstructing the whole. And with this whole digital world, the topic is phygital. Sorry, I'm occupying a lot of space, airtime, but I want to say this last thing. With the phygital, what I find is it's a fascinating blend of binaries. And our whole process of myth, art, and ritual, we applied across architecture and art. When I make a painting, I design the power dynamics between the encounter of the artwork and the viewer. And I take into account things like physics. Like Ayaz correctly said, you don't need a traditional physics 9.8 newtons, whatever, I don't remember in school, but you don't need that environment. You can change. So what I'm excited about is all these binaries between the West and the East, between physical and digital, between man and his tools, between the self and the other, are now not only developed conceptually separately, but now we need a new philosophy to combine them. And there isn't one, but a multitude of them. So that's what's exciting. And we need a new intellectual framework to understand a non-conceptual, as you say, Tapio, because we're not merely thinking beings, we're living beings. And the scariest part and the most liberating part is the most non-fungible entity in the world is you and me. And so we are now turning human experience and human existence into commodity. And that is going to have its own repercussions. So as artists, architects, designers, we need to come together and imagine dystopias and utopias to see where do we want to go with this new tool of transcendence, and how do we address loss, liberation, and mystery. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Lovely, thank you.
So thanks so much for that, Raghava. I think it completely makes sense as a tool of transcendence. On that note, we have a question from the audience. Aditi, Dar, As, and any of you can take this question. Is there some way in which these spaces, physical and digital, and the values we assign to each of these realities come in conflict, good or bad, with each other? Is there something you find both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time? I think it's a really relevant question.
Can I jump in for?
Can I take that? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ayaz. This is your panel. Go for it. This is all so exciting. Go for it.
Yeah. It is for sure. No, I mean, feel free to jump in, man. And I was just thinking that, I had a sort of a personal experience of this. I feel it's really like this comes from the domain of craft, really, about, when one looks at, in traditional frameworks, when one looks at the craft purely as an artifact, right, where it's a product to be sold in a marketplace, one assigns an MRP to it and says, okay, this is the value of this object, and say it's a 25 rupee bamboo basket, right? There is one sort of application of the digital which allows it to exist in a virtual marketplace, which allows it to say have a description and say charge another 25 rupees for it, because it exists in that new format, right? Which is what the way we understand our current commercial models. But what it fails to account is the entire transcendental aspect of that craft, right? The fact that it exists in an ecosystem of leisure, which need not necessarily have a market value, right? Like, is it art if it's not for sale, right? And one could argue that the most meaningful art comes from projects which are not for sale, which don't have an MRP, which are not made for a market, right? That's why I think 20 years ago we had only sleeping Buddhas and bamboo groves being painted, because that's what everyone wanted to hang in their living rooms, and it came in 3-4 different colors, so it would match your accent wall and all of that. So I think there's a certain whole paradigm of that's. So I think when it's applied in a brain dead way, it can actually become fairly dystopic. But if it's applied, this sort of digital layer, which is applied in a form of storytelling, if one is able to say recreate the songs that was sung when the basket was being woven, recreate the seasonality of when that basket was being woven, because the basket is inherently linked with agriculture. The byproduct of the field is what creates the raw material for the craft. So there are all these amazing linkages and amazing stories that exist in almost every single craft artifact, which is flattened when we look at it as pure MRP. So I think.
Can I push back a little just to have a conversation?
Yeah, sure.
Just because I completely agree with what you're saying, and I disagree, because I don't think dystopia is necessarily bad. I think it's important for artists to present both perspectives. So I wouldn't put a moral spin on either, because utopia and dystopia.
I think most of our studio output is dystopic. So I think we're fairly.
I know that, but I'm just saying we have to be careful.
There to provoke a conversation, really. I think whatever brings out a meaningful conversation is a good enough provocation. Yeah, absolutely.
And the second thing is, I'm trying to argue that the very conceptual Western framework that we use to have these conversations, by definition, breaks things apart into a conflict, because you understand something as in opposition to its how it differs from something else. So the very framework of understanding, standing under, requires this conflict by definition, because you identify.
So maybe not just the East and the West binary. There's also like.
Let me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought.
Okay.
Because I'm saying something very specific, which is that when we use Western framework to understand ourselves or anything, we will end up with a conflict, because that is the nature of this inquiry. Now, when you end up with a conflict, the question we need to ask is, what is our attitude towards this conflict? Is it that it exists and it's a problem, or is it that it exists and therefore it is liberating, right? So the question is not, is there a conflict? Should I choose this side or that side? The real question is, how do I want to manifest my personality, my personal values by resolving this conflict? And I think therein lies the next wave of participation in this world. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, because it's interesting, is one of the, let's say, accepted, relatively widely accepted sort of definitions about digital, for example, is the fact that it's seen as contradictory, right? So I had it sketched somewhere. It's contradictory marriage of physical and digital. So the starting point, exactly as you said, the starting point is push towards conflict. And it's defined through conflict. It's defined through defining one and the other, and then trying to treat them as opposites, where, to be honest, when you observe, when you try to not to have an opinion about it, and you observe, for example, always the best place to observe is your kids, and for example, very direct, and you look at the way they kind of live their lives already in a very mixed way, And you understand that in their conversation and in the way they talk about things, they're not creating the contradiction. They're
playing with contradiction.
Well, but they are accepting. They are accepting. They're accepting world as one. And if we are now in the physical digital, they're not really differentiating particularly. They're not interested of differentiating one or the other because it's just part of their lives. So why do it?
The aspect of play is so important to that, not Tapio? Like, I mean, the fact that you can just playfully engage with seeming opposites.
What is serious play to you?
Sorry?
What is serious play for you?
Serious play? It's going to some major therapy zone, man.
No. There is no such thing as play. Play can become chaos. Play can be pure indulgence of the senses, or it could be directed indulgence. So I'm curious.
Also, I feel, I guess one finds what one is looking for in most cases. Like, I think because I also initially used to frame it as an East versus West kind of conversation, that, that these are salient features of Western philosophy, which is, but I feel you find what you're looking for, really. I mean, if you look at 60s synergetics, right, like Bucky Fuller and, the sort of utopian visions that came out of the 60s, which are primarily Western constructs, but they were looking at a much more zoomed out perspective, right? If you're looking at, like, say, mathematical frameworks that underlie, the growth of like a carbon molecule to, sort of large scale world systems, I mean, you find synergetics, like you find overall principles, which is then, which ties in with Fritjof Capra, which ties in with, fairly esoteric Eastern models of thinking as well, which I think we're returning to in many ways. Like, we're kind of breaking out of the binaries and collapsing everything into spectrums, right? So it's happening across, it's happening in gender, it's happening in, how we understand intelligence, like right from autism. I mean, all these things now express themselves on spectrums. And when you have a spectrum understanding of something, what happens is it allows you to see vacant spots on that spectrum, right? Like, so if you know that, okay, a part of the spectrum is being populated by purely digital assets, now how can you pull out the values from those digital assets and bring them into the real world? And would that have meaning? Where mostly till now, what we've been doing is actually, because like what Tapio said, like the metaverse is still being constructed. We don't have a bucket right now for these digital values. And what is very scary to me is Facebook is building these frameworks, right? So, I mean, it's your evil empire now made 3-dimension. So, I mean, and a lot of it comes from embedded values. Like, if you're, say, going to give control to users from day one, if you exist in a Unix or a Linux kind of a space, then say that, the people, or a Wikipedia kind of space, where you're right off the bat saying that people who are the community own it, and you absolve yourself from ownership right in the beginning. I mean, there's a certain destruction of ego, and there's a certain, certain framework there, which will then hold it instead. It doesn't then fall into the pitfalls of, like, we're not creating 3-dimensional echo chambers, essentially.
But we're creating a different kind of a problem. We're creating a different kind of problem. So what I'm trying to say is all of these are different ways of being. And the individual ultimately borrows from a toolkit. And we as a culture have experienced one way of being, then another. So there are pros and cons to each. And I didn't say man versus machine. I'm actually changing that paradigm to man and machine, self and the other. And the spectrum is just the physical plotting conceptually of man and machine. However, I think there's something far more than just the plotting, the spectrum, which is, as you said, the cultural connections, the temperament, the journey, the experience of doing it. And I think those are fascinating, the world we're living in right now.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Jump in.
Yeah.
Just, I think this has been a fascinating conversation, and we would like to continue it. It's what we can do is we can just introduce some of the other speakers that we've got, and we can pull them into the conversation as well. And Tapio and Ayaz, if you'd like to hang. Yeah. So we've got, so let me just quickly, we won't necessarily wrap up the first session entirely, but we'll start the next session and we'll continue it, because I think this whole idea of man versus machine or man with machine is still very relevant to what we're talking about next. Yeah. So let me just quickly introduce.
I'm gonna say bye-bye.
Oh,
I'm gonna...
sure. Ayaz, you've been, thank you so much
Thank you,
for being
Ayaz.
with us. You've been very patient, and thank you for kind of standing through the pain.
Cheers.
Thanks
Take
a
care,
lot.
Ayaz. Thank you.
Thanks,
Sabu, you
Ayaz.
stay
Ciao.
along if you'd like to.
Bye. Thank you, Ayaz.
I'm gonna jump into my hot tub.
I can say another 15 minutes, then I need to run.
Sure, no worries. Yeah.
Okay,
Bye, Tapio.
great.
Ciao.
Perfect. So we're just going to jump into the next session really quickly. And here we're in fact talking about man and machine as well in various respects. We're talking about, we've titled this session Technology Interfaces with Design. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this is that technology has shrunk the world and now we're hyperconnected, right? And there's a very between the virtual, the real, man, machine, all of that. Brass tacks, we've got clients and their consultants in different geographies that are working together very efficiently. There are people working from across the globe, has exaggerated this relationship and has forced innovations that are continuing, with working strategies and uninterrupted success. So the question is, how is technology changing the way that we engage with design? And again, over here, we're using the word design in a very loose way, which could include everything in the creative realm. And we wonder whether the virtual experience and whether e-commerce or just interacting with the technical and the virtual and digital space, whether these are tools and whether those tools are persuasive enough to communicate rightly and to actually talk about design in the right way. So we welcome all our speakers. Neha, if you could just introduce them.
Absolutely. So we have Inato Seema. Hi, Inato. Thanks for joining us. So Inato is a founder of QuickWiz. It's an architectural visualization firm. He's a trained architect and an entrepreneur at heart. And he comes with over 9 years of experience in design and construction-related visual media. His vision is to see a world where high-quality architectural renderings are used in everyday design and communication, where QuickWiz is used by everybody to communicate design through visual media. Welcome, Inato. Then, of course, you've already met Raghava. We have Raghava KK, who has pioneered a groundbreaking body of diverse works that explore transcendence through the lens of the current digital era. His work traverses traditional forms of painting, installation, and performance, while his practice embraces new media, which is AI, neurofeedback, biohacking, video games, board games, cryptocurrency. It's all to express post-human contemporary realities. Very recently, a collaborative AI art piece created with Harshit Agarwal and 64/1. It was called Strange Genders. Was exhibited at Existential and AI art show at Imami Art Foundation in Kolkata. That artwork has currently been longlisted for the Lumen Prize. So welcome, Raghava, and thank you for joining us. Then we have Rakesh. Hi, Rakesh. Good to have you with us. Rakesh Kumar is the head design strategy at Godrej Properties Limited, based at the head office in Vikhroli, Bombay. He has 25 years of diverse experience working with organizations like K. Raheja, Kalpataru, and Indian Hotels Company Limited, which is the Taj Group. Prior to this, he spent 14 years in the US at organizations like the University of Chicago, Tishman Construction, and VOA Associates. And lastly, we have Sunita. Hi, Sunita. Thank you so much for joining us. Sunita Gundur is a partner at 100 Hands Design, a multidisciplinary design practice based in Bangalore, along with Vijay Ramachandran. She also founded Source, which is a materials, product, and furniture sourcing company. And she deeply believes in the revival and integration of Indian art and craft in the work the studio produces. She's also the founder member of WireNet World, which is Women in Real Estate Network, a platform that offers networking, mentorship opportunities for women professionals in the real estate and construction industry in India. So this is such a diverse panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I'm just going to start with a comment, and any of you can join in and add your thoughts here. So technology is, I mean, for us today, it could be seen as a means of convenience versus what Raghava and Ayaz and Tapio were talking about as a tool for transcendence. It is definitely a perspective changing catalyst in a way. So as an artist or an architect or a designer, how has it facilitated your work and your artistic expression? It'll be great to hear your personal experiences and stories. So if anyone would like to start and begin. Yeah, Sunita, why don't you start? Yeah.
Me, okay. For us, I'm talking from a perspective of where we used to do drawings on trace and do final drawings issued to site, and to what has happened now is such a huge revolution. But our practice being a small one, and due to my partner's excellent drawing skills, we still use a lot of hand drawing sketches and physical models and all that. But to be able to express and visualize and actually coordinate services and practically detail like every bit of the building using the technology that we have now is just so game changing, obviously. But also the other thing about being able to virtually walk people through spaces before even like a single brick is laid on the ground. It's just in terms of for us as a design practice and for the so much easier to put across the vision and in such detailed and perceptive ways. So I think obviously it's a boon in so many ways. But on the flip side, obviously, I have clients who come with like their little software gadgets that they come up with 3D views and tell me this is what we want. So obviously, it's also great because it's so easily available to people. And for people to play around with their aspirations on their own. So it does become a little difficult on smaller projects. But yes, it's obviously like such a boon to have all the technology that we have, and we constantly trying to bring in new systems and trying to bring in more BIM software and all that. But I think it's a challenge both in terms of time and effort that each studio needs to put in to get up to speed. But yeah, obviously it's all positive more than negatives to it.
Sunita, it's interesting that you talk about this whole idea of the hand-drawn versus the digitally made, right? And when I used to teach in university, we used to have this constant argument with our students saying that at least in the first year, we want you to draw by hand. We want you to get you need to express through your hand and through your fingers, and the thought, it has to flow from your body. And we get a lot of resistance from students because they were very tech savvy. Everyone wants to get onto computers immediately. So I actually want to ask Raghava this, given that you're an artist and you work with tech, right? How do you feel in terms of like this whole quote unquote flowing through your body and through your hand and the thought kind of coming through your fingers versus going straight, onto a screen? I mean, is there this given that you've done both, you might have an actual opinion on whether there is that difference and what that may be versus people like us who are just like, nahi, you have to draw by hand to begin with.
It's a very difficult question to begin with. I've been using technology for the last maybe 20 years in my practice. Okay. And I used to use a Wacom tablet back in my teenage. And the funny thing is I used to hide it, because what I would use the Wacom to do is to create new marks. And how I would do that is create really simple processing scripts and figure out how to use things like tangents at a curve and just simple processing scripts to create new marks. And then I would figure out how to paint it. And when I would figure out how to paint it, someone would say, wow, what is that mark? And how did you come up with it? And then I'd be like, just my little secret. Not because I wanted to hide the fact, the secret. It was because I wanted to hide the fact that I was using computers at all, because no one wanted me to. It felt like cheating. And when I made, let's say, a cartoon for a comic strip, I would do 100 compositions in 15 minutes. I'm exaggerating a little, but maybe 20 combinations in 30 minutes, where I would then look at different compositions. If I had to do that physically, that would take me, I don't know, a month. Yeah, so I feel so liberated by technology, and it invented new marks that surprised me and the audience, that I would keep inventing these marks. And one day, I started revealing the truth. I started saying, hey, this is my process. And the gallery said, shut up, don't tell anybody how you do what you do. And they said, just shut up. And everyone else was intrigued. And now is the time where I can actually open up the black box. In my latest work, every aspect of the process is opened up. The black box is open. And when I open Facebook, I see so many painting technique videos, so many robotics, like how-to videos. So the process is finally being opened up. And I think that the process is merely a friction between the consciousness and the product. And each type of friction manifests a different aesthetic. So if you understand watercolor, for me, watercolor was this mischievous, it allowed me, it just didn't obey. It would flow at its own temperament. So it allowed me to be playful. It allowed me to dance with watercolor, whereas oil was very didactic and I didn't know how to play with oil. And acrylic was in between the two. So each medium offers a friction, a resistance, a different manifestation of your friction, and it doesn't matter. But what matters is the honesty and the authenticity in that exploration. And what did this friction do that that friction could not do? You know, what was lost, what was liberating, and what is the consequence that I don't know yet? So I'm always excited by that. And I started revealing that only recently. And in my latest project, I collaborate with a neuroscientist, a material scientist, to create the viscosity of the paint that will go through the robots. I collaborate with robots. And I collaborated with Harshit, an AI artist. So we had to have data. I sold my orgasm as a work of art at Sotheby's, almost as a fuck you, but also as a provocation to say, guys, are we commodifying everything about us? Are we the most non-fungible commodity out there? And is there an ethical boundary that we need to ask ourselves? And so in doing so, I revealed every part of that equation, the process, a 4-year process, a 5-year process. And we have offered out the code at every stage, the processing code, the turning 11 terabytes into a visualizable form, and the process that went through to do that. The brainwave monitoring, so you can go and measure your own orgasm tomorrow, or whatever, your hunger, your pain, you know, and essentially opening out everything. So the artwork becomes a living piece of art that tomorrow you can fork and build upon. And through blockchain, we can see how the artwork grows as an organism. And so it's very exciting that it doesn't matter. And authorship and agency are also being challenged with process.
Right.
For example, am I the owner of this product, the orgasm piece that's sold at Sotheby's? No. Did I imagine it before it was created? Hell no. What did I do as an artist to claim credit for it? I held the integrity of that encounter and the intention of the artwork. That's it.
So you became a facilitator of sorts.
A facilitator has more to do with processes and products. I'm talking about the intention and the power dynamics of the encounter, almost like a shaman, more than so I wouldn't reduce it to just management of resources. I would say intention and the feeling. How do I feel when I encounter? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling naughty? Am I turned on? Am I not? Those intentions are managed by me. So if I bring in a neuroscientist, I'm like, sorry, this is not giving, the latent space has to be navigated till we feel that there's a transcendent moment, and I am holding that intention. Therefore, I am the artist. And it's a very complex, and the money we make is split across the table. And we needed a curator to work with us because we realized that art and art criticism are also merging. Art and art education are merging. By creating these works, we are almost creating new ways to create work. And by
No,
then
that's
engaging.
really, absolutely, Raghav. That's really interesting that you shared that. Just coming back to, let me ask you, Inato, because we were talking about process, and it'd be interesting to hear from you. You trained as a professional architect. What inspired you to get behind the technology aspect and become a provider of technological services? Can you take us through your journey?
I think, like Sunita pointed out, I started out with the, drawing all those, start with the basics, understand the first principles in design. You have to, have the physical embodiment of, what you're creating. And I think there was absolute value in that. But at the same time, there was this kind of revolution as far as computing technology was at that point, where the only animation one would remember at that point, I think it was like 2003 to 2004, where the only kind of computer related animation was created by large companies like Disney and using massive render farms and stuff like that. And that was the first time where computing technology was more accessible to the individual, and starting to use that in our design presentation. It was almost like taboo, but at the same time started to become like an acceptable norm. First year was like absolute no, you don't touch a computer. But I was always fascinated by that interface with using a sort of, in a way, some human beings like myself don't like to put a lot of physical labor into something. We try to get some kind of a machine to take care of the nitty-gritty grunt work. And that was the kind of start of all of that. And I was also interested in architectural renderings because the ability to be able to picture is 1,000 words. Of course, you could draw all of it, but then of course the computer allowed the ability to create iterations and multiple changes. And then we had the introduction of BIM, for the first time, when at that point where we started using the integration of BIM technology with architectural rendering and CPU rendering, and then going further now into a world where you guys were talking about the immediacy, like Tapia was mentioning, the requirement for the immediacy of visualization, to be able to see what you're doing and kind of interfacing with that in the real time. And also in my own practice, when we started working with, I started out first with a construction background, and we used to work with power plant control rooms. And the simplest way of presentation was create an image and present it. We didn't have to say 101 things about it. They just immediately understood it, would be able to say, I like it, I don't like it. We'd approve or disapprove the budget almost just based on images, and started to realize that there is this massive gap. Believe it or not, there still is a massive gap where even though we're using visualization as renderings almost on an everyday basis, there still is a massive gap between what is being communicated, or what is intended to be communicated from the designers, as in their mind, and what is eventually intended to be the outcome, right? From a small project, a renovation project, all the way to large developments, so which is where our goal was to be to start and work with everybody we could to be able to facilitate that, and as that's precisely just been the journey, quite simply, where we saw a gap in the market and decided to start small by just working with simple renderings and stuff like that. But with technology coming around, with a lot of the real time cloud computing, tremendous power that is there to be able to visualize, we're starting to enter into another world of visualization. So that's where we're at this point.
I think, Inara, that's really interesting. And what's also interesting about this panel, especially today, we've got more architects for this panel, so thank you very much. But that was just in reference to the previous panel where everyone started bashing architects, and I was just sitting over there saying, guys, I'm one of them, if not more. So I just feel a little comforted over here saying that we've got more architects.
Yeah.
I think what's really exciting is that, we're talking about technology, and we're talking about, one is the expression of what we're saying. One is talking about using it as a tools of communication. One is talking about using it for convenience, right? And Inato, you very rightly also brought in this whole aspect of small to large, like the scale of it. Raghav, you very interestingly said that you were able to use something and duplicate or multiplicate it, right? And talk about like scale and numbers in a certain sense for you as well. And there's this ease that technology enables for you to kind of work with your own, with respective arts. I would like to bring in Rakesh over here, because you are looking at things from a very different scale, right? You are looking at projects which are not your one-off. You're looking at much larger scales. How do you use that to express your narrative in that sense?
Sure. Thank you, Mrinalini. But I just want to touch on a discussion that was happening about the challenges of transition. Every time in the history of the world, we have transitioned from one technology to the other. And I always tell my friends that, wonder what was going on in the world when they were switching to paper or papyrus. Imagine all the stone carving people say, what are you guys writing on? This is no weight, you can't even feel the weight when you pick this thing. This will never last. So I'm sure there was a lot of resistance, people who wanted to switch over to this technology. And I'm calling it technology because it involved the processing of paper and also developing pens to write with it. So I think, and people who carved on stones, I'm sure they couldn't go beyond few phrases. And look at where we are today with the amount of written words that has been generated through the new medium. And maybe now it's going to disappear because everything is now visual through YouTube, and you don't want to read anything anymore. At least my kid, he thinks that this will, cinema will be passe because if one, they don't have the patience and it's too long. You have to communicate, your idea in the shortest form through visual medium. And again, this is the transition that we are seeing in our profession. And very interesting, experience that I had was when I read in somewhere and said, you draw in 2D and you build in 3D. It never appeared that, yeah, we always draw in 2D and we are actually building 3D. So it was just a huge disconnect. And if you see today the journey of BIM, we are still developing 3D models, but we'll convert into a 2D drawing and then we'll build. I think this is another transition that we need to wait for when everything will go to, fabrication of, designs rather than converting into a form into 2D completely. Now, see, technology definitely is an enabler. It is not a tool that replaces thinking or what human intervention or the interventions that a designer can bring upon during design. Maybe through AI, eventually they might be able to create design. So right now it is at a phase where it is it's just an enabler. Now, the scale that we are handling, yes, it is daunting to have so much of information being generated. What do you do with that information? How do you ensure that that fits into the process of design? So we are transitioning into these mediums, and technology, and BIM being one of them, building information modeling. Again, it's in a nascent stage in India. So the ecosystem has not developed fully. Yes, there are certain pockets where it is as evolved, but there's a lot to be done, and that is where we are facing the challenge of actually implementing. However, as a company, as a corporate, we have taken a conscious call that we will actually transition to BIM on all our projects. Now, it was a very bold step. Of course, there are a lot of teething issues that we are facing, but eventually we feel that is the right way to proceed, because once we are able to integrate these models, and my vision for BIM is, just like the game SimCity, I want to have a BIM city. So actually all these models should be integrated, talking to each other and generating data, because your decisions are database decisions many a times. And what happens in architecture, it becomes an intuitive decision. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it might not work. And not to say that if you're basing a decision on big data or generating information out of data might be the right call that you will take, but at least in terms of the engineering part of things, which is all your efficiencies and coordination with other trades or generating cost models and all, will help you take faster decisions and hopefully the right decision. So it is very, very challenging. However, I'm sure when hand drafting was transitioning into AutoCAD, everybody faced the same issue. And architects at that time also were offering additional fee or demanded additional fee. The project had to be done in AutoCAD. Similar is the case. So it is. I think we'll all have to be part of the journey, and I'm sure when we reach the destination with AutoCAD, like how AutoCAD is a default, similarly Revit or BIM will be the default way of doing business. But then there'll be another technology which is actually evolving or emerging, which is parametric design and AI. So that is something that we are still also focusing on to understand what are the benefits we get out in our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rakesh, for sharing that. I think your perspective from the architecture and the corporate design point of view was very relevant. I want to understand, Sunita, and maybe you'd be the best person to chime in here. What is the expectation today from the client, from the client's end? Like, has the experience because of technology made it easier for them to envision a product or a project, or is it something more than that? Is the expectation bigger than what it was many months ago, or is the conversation changing because technology is in the picture? If you can share your thoughts.
The expectation in terms of norms, have changed. Like initially, we hardly used to do any, like high resolution renderings or realistic renderings for all projects. So if because we don't do them to a professional level in-house, so we used to outsource them. But now we've realized that we can't really survive with that, because I was also going to bring in this point about academia, about how that has to really keep up with the needs of what the transition is happening in the market now. Because a lot of the kids have just touched upon BIM and Revit, and they don't even know how to use it when they start working in an office. So for an office to actually completely switch to a complete BIM model, or to do like really realistic renderings right at the get-go is a really difficult process and investment to put into, So I think academia also has to kind of review the curriculums that they're teaching at colleges and kind of keep up with what is actually being asked by clients. So I think it's a combination. I don't think it's, like Rakesh was saying, it's a great enabler. And how much of it we offer at what scale of projects, I think we decide based on the scale of the project. So depending on that, we're able to kind of show as much realistic renderings and walkthroughs. And we also use virtual immersive technology with Trezi. That has been a great success in our office. The clients really understand the scale of the space and what they're going to actually feel like moving through the space. So that everybody loves. So, it's like you have to keep adding these tools, but but I think it's become pretty much the norm that people expect you to show what the space is going to look exactly like before they can actually agree to go ahead with it. It's not just drawings now. I don't think it ends with that.
It's interesting you say that, Sunita, and this kind of leads right into the next question that I had. And it's actually, directed towards both Inato and Raghava, because I feel that you're a little bit on two ends of a spectrum over here. And it'd be interesting for you both to respond to this. It's like an open-ended question, which I'm just curious, right? A lot of us, when we think of technology, we think of tools and we think of manners and material in which we can, like we discussed earlier, either make it convenient or communicate, and some of these things that we've been talking about as well, right? Whether it's BIM or Revit or whatever else it is. But what is the opportunity that we have over here to look at technology beyond just softwares, right? Whether it's in the art, design, architecture fields, even other than that, just experience, human experience at the end of the day, right? Because all of us as designers, in some field or the other, we are catering to human experience. As architects, we are building the built environment for humans. As artists, we are providing something for them to experience in a different way. So how do we kind of go beyond that? And what is the opportunity that we're looking at over here? Inato, if you'd like to.
I think
maybe Inato can start with something more tangible.
I like I like how Raghava brings in another dimension to thought to this whole conversation. Which makes you just start wondering, it's like, I didn't think of that.
Dimensions are needed, yes.
If I can add, and I will over here say on behalf of the architects, we need more of that.
I think I think as far as the where we are in technology, even coming off of what Sunita shared and Rakesh shared as well, we are at a very nascent stage, especially in the field of architecture. We are in a very, very nascent stage in the integration of technology with the architectural design process. I think a lot of that is being explored through various, tools and various things like that. But at the absolute forefront, the way I see, especially with how AI is developing, there is this talk about, the singularity, where at some point there is going to be such an expedited rate of change in technology where technology itself will be able to self-propagate. Brings it to a point where, in the future, it's really difficult to decide, which way it's going to go. Because on one hand, with us, when we're working with architects across the world, we have a bunch of architects who have no idea such a thing is going on. And then at the other end, we have architects who are creating programs and softwares which are able to self-analyze buildings and iterate 10,000 different permutations and combinations of the perfect office layout to be able to serve that particular need. There's these two opposite ends of the world as far as the interface between technology and the architectural design field is concerned. I think we have many years to go ahead before we can see any kind of integration or sort of a cohesive thing. But I think in the tangible future, like Rakesh said, at the end of the day, as of today, all this BIM technology and all of that has to translate down onto 2D drawings, which has to then be translated down to the actual person, the who's actually putting things together, right? Which also takes me to the other side, where Sunita was saying, where visualization has now become the norm. It's like everybody expects it, but at the government level, like in the US, until the pandemic, it was not a requirement in many counties where you had to submit renderings, which accurately represent, what's going to happen and the impact it's going to have with the neighborhood. It was not a requirement. They just had to submit plans because they had a whole checklist of things that they needed to do, and communication was like so. So there are lots of fragments, so there are lots of pieces to this entire puzzle which has to come together. And the way I see it is, until, I was just thinking about our topic for today, and, I was trying to imagine a world where the person who's actually building the building is in a virtual environment, able to actually see how things are put together so that they're able to translate it, which kind of puts into contrast the other side of things where AI is like, saying we don't need the human being, where all of this, is being able to be created or constructed on its own. There is this constant, as time progresses and as this technology is advancing, there is this sort of a parallel race that is happening between the two sides, where on ground, what we're building has to be translated into, tangible things. At the same time, we have the other side, which is spearheading technology at a, at almost an unfathomable kind of rate. But the day we're able to see some sort of like relationship between the person who's actually doing it or what is being constructed on site, and the visualization and how that entire communication process is being presented through the various tools, we'll still be, constantly wondering where we want to go, as far as using technology is concerned.
Raghava, would you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Look at all the clauses I have. I mean, I've been put into a box now. I have to break out of this. Firstly, Sunita, how lovely to see you.
I know.
Sunita and I have worked on a project, and I gave her so much heartache, headache, but I still love her.
Not at all. That was actually like a perfect project to integrate art, tech, and architecture. We should.
Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah, please
firstly,
do. Go ahead.
I want to start with the most disgusting thing I have ever done. The last person I was dating, I broke up with them on a phone call. Okay, and I want to say something interesting. Not that I intended to, I just didn't have the opportunity to meet them in person. But that became the defining aspect of our relationship. And why I'm bringing this up is there is technology and there's techne, which is how we use technology and why we use it and for what intention. Yes, I can pick up the phone and achieve the same result, which is breaking up, either on an SMS, a text message, an email, in person, or on a call. The second example I want to give you is I was very angry with my mother when I was 18 years old. And I wrote this letter to her about how horrible she is. Okay, this long email. It was that moment of finding myself. And my dad looks at it very casually and he says, whenever you want to say something mean to somebody, don't put it in writing. It gets set in stone. Say it, and say it from your heart, and say it making eye contact. Now, these are the kind of technique that we don't have when we talk about technology. We assume the output is the same, regardless of how we achieve it. We look at it through the lens of efficiency. But how efficient are we in communicating? We may be efficient in communicating something, but what is the outcome of that medium, the friction, right? So I just wanted to throw that in, that we're not talking about the softer aspects of techne with technology, because a phone was invented. This device was not a computing device. It was actually, when they put a camera on this, I thought they're stupid. Why would I ever have a bad low pixel camera when I have a beautiful phone? Today, I don't carry a camera. So what's really interesting is, now coming back to Sunita, my brain is like a schizo brain. Okay, so I'm going to jump and very quickly. I want to share something with you guys. Can I share something as my screen with you guys?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share. Let me see if this works. Okay. There are two things I want to share. One is I'm going to give you guys a copy of this. This is our paper called Transcendence for the Post-Human Age, and it addresses a lot of the questions that you're talking about, a relationship between labor and man, how technology has replaced every form of labor. It starts with mechanical labor. We're lazy people. We love someone else to do our job. There's mechanical labor. There is emotional labor. Like, you know, that newborn babies are better taken care of. Incubators, smart incubators do a better job of early childhood parenting than moms, because it's learning from a million moms how to provide the right temperature, the right warmth, the music, the sound, and it's like killing it. It's so good. No mom can beat the incubator. So emotional labor is being replaced. I'm just being provocative. Just bear with me for a few minutes. Then I'm making the argument that creative labor is also replaceable, which is why I now use AI to replace every part of me that can be replaced. So I want to find what part of me is not replaceable, right? Then there's another form of labor, which is spiritual labor. We're now doing pujas online. We are now figuring out how to spiritually outsource to technology. And I'm saying, if you look at all these forms of labor and technology replacing this labor, then we need to really ask ourselves, can we separate ourselves from technology? Is techne and technology, if you look at the historical use of the word technology, I don't know if you know that technology comes from the art of using a tool. It is actually the art form. Techne means art. So it's really funny that when we think of technology, we think digital. And it's not at all the case. Our hands are technology, right? Now, all of us have hands, but when we Indians eat with our hands, we have a certain sort of a proficiency in that the experience of eating is so different from a Westerner trying to do the same thing. So all I'm trying to say is it's not a simple equation. We need an alternate system to look at the relationship between man and technology. And I have a small proposal that I would like to make, which is my dream for art, architecture, and everything. Okay, I said, forget about the job of technology. It's all going to change. Everything is changing, and we're going to be made redundant very soon. Okay, and I have some theories about that. However, what is it that matters to me? So here's a proposal, and I'm summarizing the entire proposal in this one page. I think the world needs to go from being exclusive to inclusive, and this has political ramifications. I'm talking about art, but this is applicable across. Second is, I don't like the fact that this Western idea of doomsday, this death of art, death of history, death of painting, death of drawing, this doomsday, this loss aversion that we as human beings are so tuned into, as opposed to looking at liberation and mystery. I want it to be hopeful. I want artists to look into the future, not into the past. I want it to be not anxiety creating, but healing spaces. And all of this requires a very different mindset. Instead of being backward facing, future facing. Instead of talking about who we were, who can we be? Who the hell cares who we were? It's really about what matters from where we were to where we want to be. And from academic, philosophical pursuits of art to completely new, the word relevance is the key buzzword in the digital age today. Yeah. Why should I give a shit about your brilliant Kantian construction of the world? Right now, how is it relevant? Who are the new patrons? What are the new audiences? And finally, let's not be a commodity. Let's be a way of life. Let's actually live it. So I think this is what I'm pushing for in the art world. And when Sunita and I work together, I use this. I'm going to show you one last thing and I'll shut up.
I was wondering where you were going with this.
I'm coming, because I'm all over the place. I told you, there is a relationship. I don't know the relationship. I'm jamming.
So that's the difference between an artist and an architect.
I know it's going somewhere. Either you will figure it out or I will. So for me,
we're with you on the journey, Raghav.
Y'all are so articulate. I'm being a little mischievous. And I'll come to design and architecture because it was working with Sunita was a brilliant experience because we started off by saying, what is the myth that we want to live by creating an office? So we created a space together called the Space, which was for Kalari Capital. And what we were doing is turning our beliefs into an experience, right? And this process for me has 3 steps: myth, art, and ritual. Okay, that's where design, you say, what is the relationship between design, experience, and philosophy, right? So myth is something you believe that can change reality, the experience of living. Art is the design that allows this myth to exist. And ritual is how people engage, they encounter with the art. And each one of these requires a certain discipline and a relationship between the 3. So the way I do my life plan is I start with an idea. When something changes me, when I meet someone who says something that blows my mind, I go to the drawing board and I ask myself, how does this change me? What is the myth that I believe in that will affect me? How do I then design a way of living that changes my experience? And what is my ritual that will allow me to reinforce this? So for me, this is how I design art. This is how I design my conversations with my children. This is how I design my divorce. When I was divorced, I was like, what is the myth that we are going to hold on to that's going to change us? How do we engage with it? It's crazy. You may think I'm mental, but all I'm trying to say is that these 3 are not separatable. We need to bring them back together. Myth, art, and ritual. And design is philosophy is as important to design as design is to philosophy. I'm saying ritual, the experience is as important. So we can't cut off and isolate any one of these. So I don't know what I'm saying, but I wanted to share.
Raghava, somebody from the audience is asking whether, Samreen is asking whether you can get a copy of your 64:1 paper.
Absolutely.
Possible
it's actually, can I share it with you guys and can you give it to whoever?
Yeah.
Because it's a published paper, you have to pay for it. Otherwise, I'll just share it. I want people to actually read it.
If you have a link, we can actually share it right now. During the
I'm going to add the link to your, I kept it ready.
Oh,
there you go.
Great.
There you go. So the
Perfect.
panelists can access the link over here in the chat box.
So when I heard Raghav for the first time, I thought the
Hi, Rakesh.
Hi. I thought the topic was changed to technology, philosophy, and design. Am I in the wrong room?
No, so the reason why
that's the beauty of it, right?
Pleasure.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Pleasure to hear you. I would love to interact with you later and maybe exchange some ideas.
I would love to, because you're living the philosophy we are exploring. So
I was going to say, Rakesh, it would be really interesting to hear your perspective on what Raghava just shared, because you come from a very different sort of space, and how you would kind of read into what he's explaining.
I'll need a few drinks to come at his level.
Supposed to have wine.
We told all our panelists to bring their own wine.
I told you I'm the mischief maker. I said, be careful before inviting me.
I mean, it's good to hear somebody like that who's so passionate about, art. And maybe I might be completely off to what Raghav said, because that's how I'm interpreting him. What he said is, and this is my take on art into architecture, is that somehow we have become, at least in India, I feel that, you're just basically trying to complete the design process and execute the building. So the softer things definitely gets missed out. And, sometimes to take some, take the same concept at a philosophical level, it is important to intrigue people, because art is nothing but it just reactivates our senses. And one of the things that I have been trying to promoting in our projects is that, we have to integrate art in our design, and maybe art that gives back to the community. A simple thing, I'll say that if A, B, C, D or the alphabets are written on the wall, somebody's getting out of that art, because some mom can be sitting there trying to teach her kid, about something, or something that you can feel, interact with. I don't think I'll ever be able to match up to Raghav's level delivery. So I don't know, this is what I interpreted, and I'm sure I'm definitely not sounding even close to what Raghav was talking about or thinking.
No,
No,
but
but
thank you for saying that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Rakesh saying
Yeah,
thank you
yeah.
for saying
No,
what
go
you
ahead.
did, because this is precisely the conversation that's missing. I
Yeah.
don't have access to someone who on the ground, so which is why I actually sit on the boards of logistics companies and trying to see how that myth, art, and ritual can actually work there across the board. And bringing it back to architecture, I just wanted to say this was an example of how Sunita and I worked. We looked at the materials, we looked at the energy zones, we looked at the values that it's not just to look at art as an employee and say, oh, my organization can afford expensive work, or it can intimidate me with these crazy abstract bullshit. Instead, we actually say, what are the real values that you want people to be primed with every morning when they come to work?
Yeah.
How do you create a journey for them from entrance to their cubicle so that that journey reminds them why the hell they're showing up every morning and giving the prime of their life to this mission? Because they're doing a mundane small task, but it's contributing to a larger change in ecosystem. And they have to be reminded of the macro micro relationship through art, the values. So I'm saying there are a lot of key messaging that you experience through art. It's not merely decorating the place, adding good energy to the place.
So I to pick up on that, and Rakesh, I think, we're trying to get back to the question of patronage, right? Like, how do you give value to good design and having art and craft that actually gives you the greatest experiences every single day of your life? The value that you put on that, it's not just about it's that whole fine culmination of everything, right? So to actually recognize good design versus bad design, and if so, the question of relevance again comes up. I have clients who are telling me like, oh, beware, there are companies that are designing a room for 500 rupees each. Like, am I really competing with them? It's like, it's such a really terrible thought to be kind of dealing with. I mean, I know the value of good design is far more than that. So how many people recognize that value is also so important. So I think it has to come from across the board, to actually value what you live in and work in and what that brings to your life at a much larger level, besides all the tech and everything, obviously.
I can sympathize with you, Sunita, because somebody like you must have asked that question about cost, because
No. It wasn't.
we are always optimizing cost, and that's the reason why we optimize costs. If you see the rental value of a commercial space in India is less than $1.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's 50 rupees, 60 rupees. And I have seen proposals which will blow you out of your mind that you'll never be profitable in a project. So I think in India, the relevance is efficiency. And I always give this example of Mangalyaan. You can build 10 times the size of a rocket, what India used. It was just our jugaad way of achieving the same result. And, sorry, I'll just take a minute. I'll give you an example of the ad that Maruti was running for quite some time. There are guys sitting in NASA and asking, what is the kilonewton or torque this Columbia spaceship can have. And there was one guy, Indian guy, is asking me, what is the mileage this thing gives? So it is all about mileage and efficiency, unfortunately, until we become a developed world, and depends what kind of building type you're doing. Today, the margins are thin, as you know, costs are going up, so there are a lot of challenges that are inherent that comes in the business. So I think if we are able to figure out an optimized way of delivering the same result, then I think, and at the end of the day, we have to circle back and say, what is the value I'm bringing in for the customers or people who are going to use it at the end of the day. Again, sometimes I've seen these beautiful crowns that are built at the top of the building, but honestly, I mean, how many times would you really, appreciate it if your house is not designed well? So I think that's where we have to draw the line and see where we can optimize the cost. I would rather put that money in optimizing the layout for
but that's the whole point. Good design is not expensive. I think it's the value that you give to good design. Good design doesn't have to be expensive.
And budgets are realistic, unfortunately. So
totally.
No, I mean, I want to push back a little, Rakesh, because here's the difference. It's like Maslow's law, the argument you're making, saying first, let's give them kapada, makan, whatever and then let's worry about quality of life. And I disagree. The beauty of India is that there is spiritual fulfillment at the lowest level in the hierarchy. This is a very Western framing of efficiency of a system, but there's a fundamental flaw. If you assume people don't want a quality of life because it's expensive, the expensive nature of it is simply because it's not valued. The few that do it actually understand it, are charging millions of dollars just for consulting, right? And I'm saying there's a paradigm shift we need to understand what is the quality of life because in a matter of years, some startup will come and say, Indians actually do care about quality of life, and they will screw all the big giants in like this. So I'm saying there is this change in a paradigm shift in thinking about the business. And by no means am I taking away the reality of delivering this value to millions of people. So forgive me if I sound arrogant, but I'm saying there is a need now to change the conversation, to not make this assumption.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. When we interact with designers and consultants and they come up with these ideas, we absolutely, are pleasantly, surprised that somebody is trying to bring in that value. So to case in point, we are working with an architect in Delhi who's bringing all the cultural aspects, of Delhi to integrate in our design. And in fact, some of them are not, actually, it's a no cost. It's a cost of planning. That's what we do to integrate. So if that thinking comes at the beginning, and this is what we are expecting from the design fraternity, that it is not, and of course you have to do the hygiene thing, because obviously you can't ignore that. And once you've done the hygiene thing well, all these integrations of culture, value, the first thing I ask, if a project is located in a specific region, what is the cultural nuances? Like, for example, if you have a project in Calcutta, have you given a ground for Durga Puja, which is, the most emotional connect anybody would have, but we have not designed for that. Now, another experience that I've, or something that I share with my designers is that we design all these beautiful buildings, but have we planned for death? We live in high-rise apartments. If there's an eventuality in a family, how do people react to it? We've just left people, to figure out a way, and that is what the Indian way of chalta hai, that whole attitude. So if that suggestion comes from a designer, which one of the designers did present, in one of our projects, I was like, wow, this is different. Nobody's thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of understanding what are the needs of the people and doing it not just for the sake of doing it, but actually bringing value to their lives. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And of course, it's a paradigm shift.
Thank you.
All right.
And we shouldn't act from FOMO. That is what I don't want corporates to do. They shouldn't go and adopt us because there's this fear of missing out on something that may change them. There has to be true conversation, true collaboration, true understanding, and an investment in time, effort, energy, and intention to actually give people a better quality of life. That should be factored in. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raghava. I think that was a perfect line to end this session. Just wanted to say thank you, everyone. Wish we had a little longer time to explore this a little more. And unfortunately, we do not have time to take audience questions. But on that note, thank you so much for participating in such an intriguing session that went from software to relationships to technology and technique to self-discovery also in a way. So this is really intriguing. I hope this left with food for thought for all of our speakers as well as our attendees. Thank you, Rakesh, Sunita, Inato, and Raghava. You can stay on for our next session.
Thank you.
Can we take a few minutes of a break before we start with the next one? Is that okay?
We've got our panelists are here.
I think our panelists have joined already.
Yeah. But it might make sense to take a couple of minutes off just so that people can stretch their legs.
Yes.
And come
because
back.
we'll be going back to back. Yes.
Yeah. But again, thank you all so much for being here. Also, we didn't get a chance to thank Tapio and Ayaz, but that was a fabulous chat as well. And we're just hoping to see more and more enthusiastic and very honest. I think that's what's been really exciting, that we've been having some really candid and honest conversations. So thank you all for your contributions. And please do stick on. There's another session that's coming out, which promises to be great fun and very insightful.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we'll be back in about 4 minutes.
Sure.
Thanks.
We are Godrej. That's us in ruby, green, and blue. And this is a story of the little things we do. It started with a little thing we made to protect you and your things. Over 100 years on, we're still doing the same, except it now has wings. Little things that will take you places you can't get to on an airplane. And little things that circle the earth and tell our farmers when it'll rain. Little things that keep our animal friends hale and hearty. And little things that keep kids healthy and naughty. Little things that keep not just our homes, but even medicines and vaccines cool. And little things that rinse away dirt and allergens, so your little ones don't miss a day of school. Little things that make washing hands so much fun. And some that make your cars and homes smell like spring. Little things that keep diseases away. And some that make your hair shine and swing. Little things that help you make things. Big, small, and everything in between. And little things that help carry those things to places far and even unseen. Little things, or should we say little spaces, where you live, work, and play. And little things you keep in those spaces to sit, sleep, or just put things away. Locks, soaps, buildings, and missiles. Well, there are quite a few. These are some of the little things we do.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We've had such a good start to day one. It's been quite inspiring and motivating so far. We are now going to start with our third session of the day called How to Make the Headline. So a little bit about why we thought of putting this session together. While advertising for creative services such as architecture and interior design remains unauthorized, especially in India, the need for putting oneself out there to get noticed, gain recognition, and also create a brand has become increasingly common and even necessary to create further work opportunities. So getting the right break, doing the right job, projecting the right image. This session will probably explore the what, why, where of design publicity, PR, and communication. And we're so pleased to have three very eminent speakers with us to share their insights. Renani, do you want to introduce our speakers today?
Yes, for sure. We are joined by Josh Dobbins. He's an arts and cultural communication specialist overseeing Flint Culture's Mumbai and Delhi offices. Josh joined Flint Culture in 2016 and has led various significant PR and brand strategy campaigns across India, as well as promoting Indian clients internationally. Some of his key projects have included the India Art Fair, Saffron Arts, Serendipity Arts Foundation, KNMA, Elephant Parade, Neela House, Jaipur, Piramal Museum, and the list goes on. But alongside this, Josh has also worked with individual artists in India to promote their work and create exhibition opportunities within the country and internationally. So Josh is here with us, and he brings a very Indian and international experience with him. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the panel.
Hi everyone.
We also have with us Parina. Parina Thapar is the co-founder of Longform India, a consultancy firm specializing in building brand identities through cohesive communication. They focus on being a springboard for brand building via storytelling, using marketing communications, media campaigns, public relations, and creative collaborations. Parina describes Longform as a way of seeing, being, and enabling, celebrating the power of imagination and incredibly talented storytellers who bring to life diverse forms of creative expression every day. Parina enjoys joining the dots for brands by making connections between businesses and consumers, ideas and products, companies and cultures. A very warm welcome, Parina. Thank you for joining us today. And last but not the least, we've got Vinita Chaitanya, who's tuning in from Bangalore. Vinita is a renowned name in Indian design, best described as having a style that is contemporary classic, which she says is a euphoric blend of sumptuous silks, traditional paisleys, exquisite Indian artifacts, and modern Western coverables. Her design firm has been going strong since 1988. She creates livable art, and her passion for Indian art and heritage translates into the bespoke, sublime spaces that she creates. Layering different cultures and periods, her work extends beyond interior design, driven by her passionate involvement from concept through to delivery. A recognized influencer, her Instagram page is like stepping into her personal mood board, giving her vast following and insight into all aspects of design. A very, very warm welcome, Vinita. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're very excited to have all three of you here today. You all come from various backgrounds, working in what we probably imagine as some sort of an intersection. All your paths have crossed, or your works kind of intersect at some point. And it's interesting to see how all of you bring a very specific and personalized perspective. So we'd love to hear your stories and your experiences over the journeys, over your personal journeys. But I want to begin by asking something to all of you, and you could perhaps take turns to answer this. And we're curious to know about identity, right? Is identity about what others say you are, or is it about what you yourself think you are? And how does that perception, your own perception or others' perception, translate into building a brand today? Vinita, would you like to start? Because considering that you're building your own brand on a daily basis, and what a job you've done of that, I have to say. So why don't we start with you?
For me, identity is who I am. very clearly. I'm very honest on my page, very honest in real life. Sometimes I've been asked to zip up because I'm so blunt and so honest.
Not tonight, though.
No, I say things which is like foot in the mouth. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this is what you are. This is how you need to be. Dress this way. Wear this. Otherwise, it's not looking good. So that's me. So my brand is about me, what I see, what I do, how I feel, how I am every day. Days when I'm possibly don't have anything to say, I won't say it. And days when I have loads to say, I'll probably do 2 posts and 20 stories. It just depends on my mood. And that is me, and that is my brand, I think.
So you would
That's my
say
identity.
So your brand represents your true identity.
Yes, absolutely. There is nothing else to it. It's just me, who I am. That is it.
So that's interesting, right? Because you're kind of working for yourself in this case, and you're building your own brand. Farina and Josh, we'd love to hear from you because you're working with other people and you're building their brands. So how do you approach something like this? Farina?
First of all, hi, Vinita. Hi, Josh. Let Josh go next. Let me be gracious.
Sure. I think it varies. I mean, should your brand be your brand or should it be about does it have to be the same? Does it have to be your personal brand? I think when your personal brand and your sort of work brand are the same, it probably does make life easier. It's a more honest story, but they don't always have to be the same. And I think that perhaps diverges from an artist and a designer, especially as a designer grows and goes on to have an agency or something, then that brand story does start diverging from their personal identity, whether they necessarily want that to or not. And sometimes the challenge is sort of defining those two differences or keeping it the same. Certainly with artists, I think it can be different and difficult because an artist's brand, I don't necessarily like the word brand in relation to art and design. And I think that can be a challenge. Do you have to even have a brand? Because to me, brand always feels very commercial. And it's creating that commercial identity that many great artists don't have or don't necessarily need. And I think where your work can be naturally branded, it probably does make it significantly easier to position yourself on social media or in the press. But it doesn't necessarily mean your work's better. It's just, it suits being branded in a better way. If that makes any sense.
Thank you, Josh. I think what Josh said is very important on whether you are an eponymous label. I mean, are you personally the name? So there is a certain bit of subjectivity, which is very important for the brand to be authentic. But as a brand grows in its life cycle, tomorrow it may be your name, but the brand has its own ecosystem, which is going to be different from you. So when brands grow, today, maybe 0 to 25 years, maybe 50 years, you may be the person. But there's always that succession of looking at how are you taking the core values of an eponymous label, and tomorrow somebody else may take it further. So of course, in family-based businesses, it's generational, but in brands, it is not generational. So if you're a luxury brand or you're a brand like Vinita Chaitanya, the name may still be Vinita Chaitanya, but what will be the succession? So what are the core values that Vinita is building that tomorrow, if she wants to bring in a creative director or she wants to do a collaboration, she would want it to be something that the authenticity of the identity of Vinita Chaitanya can go forward, but the brand will evolve with the next person coming in so that it is relevant for the next 100 years. So I think that thing of identity evolves with time. It is set on very core and strong foundation, but it also has to remain in the present. So when someone like Vinita curates her content, she's not confusing the medium with the message, right? She's been there, she's been around for long, she has the life experience versus someone who was going to be, a 25-year-old Vinita Chaitanya.
would they be able to look at it in the same way? Maybe yes. Maybe it would be the same thing, but will that person have the confidence to put it out there as much as a lived experience may give you the confidence? So I think the biggest role that people who consult brands can do is give the confidence to brands to say, listen, it's okay. Try and be more and more of who you are. As Josh said, we are the filters for many voices. So if the artists can be true to themselves, and if they are comfortable and they can cut out the noise, only then will that art really reflect it correctly. Otherwise, this intangible creeps in on where your success goes wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I don't think I could have been as honest or as sort of don't care too much attitude 25 years ago. Possibly also when I joined social media, which was I think 4 years ago, I had never been on Facebook or any other form of social media before. And I did not know anything. I did not know the reach. I did not know nothing about it. And as I grew into sort of exploring and being out there and receiving, honest opinions and sort of just feedback. It just became so much easier. And the last 2 years was simple. And now I just say what I want to, but it's also this whole process of evolution, which you've said so clearly. Yeah. And if there is a Vinita Chaitanya to succeed me, I pity them right now.
That's exactly where the challenges come for everybody, right? You could be Flint, but you're looking for a Josh to understand the values of Flint. You could be Vinita looking for a creative director. But that value translation with giving independence for a brand to be able to keep evolving, I think that's where the fun starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, all of you shared such relevant points. I mean, I admire the fact that all three of you brought out that a brand or the persona has to be authentic. And in authenticity, there comes authentic, honest storytelling. I wanted to understand, and maybe Josh and Parina, you can add your thoughts here to begin with, and Vinita, you can definitely add in. When brands reach out to you, or when designers or artists reach out to you, what are the first three things that you tell them or advise them? Because we also understand that there is a I mean, maybe it's not the right word, but there is a pressure to have a significant presence online to be seen, right? And I'm sure Josh and Parina, you must have. I mean, the request is, I need followers, or I need to be there instantly and grow instantly online. So I was wondering, from your perspective, from a consultant's perspective, what are the three things that you would advise a professional like this who comes to you with such a request?
It's not necessarily three things, but I think it's important to look a step beyond that and what you actually want out of your business or life or career, whatever it is, and then look at how you use PR or digital to help you get there. People are always coming to us saying they need PR without really thinking why they want PR, what the benefit of PR, what they're going to use it for. And that creates challenges because you're just sort of throwing it out there and hoping to get lucky, hoping to hit something that will be a result. And I think it's a case of looking back at what you want and working backwards and looking at how you can use digital or how you can use those tools to reach that point.
I mean, I think the biggest thing we try and tell brands is, are you coming to me for push marketing? Then maybe we are not the right reason, because, if you haven't, because you can only push a story that much. The story must have the legs. For first, a journalist may not know enough. So yes, you could be the gatekeeper who can speed dial and get the message out there and position it and sort of find the layers of what is the hook to talk. But the story has to be there. And if sometimes the story is not there, it is then push marketing. So I prefer to pull in, you could be a young brand, you could be a startup, you could be one with inner potential, which is yet to come out. You could be established, but I really don't want to go begging. There has to be a reason that when you have the room of the editor or a feature writer, this should be something which you are convinced about. And if you are convinced, I doubt if you cannot create a roadway. That's really the main thing, that there has to be a story. And when you are just talking about scaling up, then it's different. I mean, you already, maybe you're the number 2 or the number 3 in the business. There's space for everybody. And then the strategy is very different because they could be 10 of the same, but the strategy for a brand which has already been established and now just needs to scale up to create noise is very different than a brand which first needs to be discovered in the first place.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
I think it's interesting, Purina, that you brought this up, and this idea of, if you have a story to tell, it will be told, right? And this is something that Sneha and I both have, I'm sure I can speak for her as well. We've both experienced, because we've both been in the media space, telling other people's story, right? And I have to validate what you're saying at some level, because it becomes very difficult to talk about something where there is nothing to talk about, right? But what the different kind of challenge.
I'm losing Mrinalini. Is it me? Everybody?
Yeah, me too. I can't hear her.
Yeah, we'll just wait for a few seconds. Yeah.
Marina, are you back in Delhi?
Yes, I have been here for a while, and I'm waiting to get away.
Tools that we're using to communicate these. Oops.
Sorry, Mrinalini, you'll need to repeat your
hear me
question. We lost you in the middle.
Sorry. The technology gods are not with me today. But, so what I was saying is that we're talking about the tools of communicating these stories, right? And how they're changing now. And we've had certain challenges with that, where different platforms require different kind of storytelling and different kinds of narratives to be drawn around that, right? There is, of course, this, and I can't escape talking about this today, just the fact that media outreach, PR, branding, identity, all of that going from a print sort of medium into a digital medium. Things have changed. There's been this massive sort of paradigm change. So if we could talk a little bit about that in terms of, what are the challenges? Are we facing a shift? Because everyone's told, print magazines are over, print media is over. But at the same time, having coverage in print is a lot more valuable. Or I won't say a lot more valuable, I would say is still valuable, right? So I'll actually ask you that. Do you think print media is still more valuable? And if so, what is that change that we are facing today? What are the struggles that everyone's talking about?
It serves a different purpose, I think.
As simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, they fundamentally do slightly different things. And I think they're diverging possibly, but not in terms of quality or why you'd want them. If you want numbers, if you want people to go through to your website to buy something, if you want, online is hugely valuable. But I think especially in India to some degree, but especially internationally, you're seeing this sort of blend of magazines and coffee table books. I think Platform calls it a bookazine now. It comes out biannually. And you see publications globally like Serial and Hole and Corner, which become these sort of almost like archiving your work, especially as an artist. It's a desirable object that you keep on the bookshelf for the rest of your life. And that's an archive of your work in the best possible timeless format, or it sits on a coffee table. And it really does sort of blend the definition between what might have been a catalogue raisonné 100 years ago and is now a sort of book magazine. And digital gets you immediate results. Click-throughs, which is hugely valuable. It's what most people want PR for, but it's a different aim.
Yeah, I mean, it's different mediums, right? You have a newspaper, you have a weekend daily, you have a magazine, you have an annual edition. That is the way print worked earlier. So similarly, digital is also like that. You have an Insta post, you have an Insta story, you have a campaign. So how and when the messaging has to go in, I think both go hand in hand. If print media is going through a little bit of a crisis right now, it's honestly because it is reinventing from a time-honored tradition to understanding that we are probably confusing the medium for the message. The picture is not dead, the camera may not be there, but we are in a much more visual world than we were before, right? So there's an overload of visual element also which is taking place. Who doesn't say that, oh, get me a post and let it just be hashtags? Everybody says, get me a long post. That means people, so obviously, even in a magazine, when you open a magazine to read, I mean, you girls will understand in journalism, the training starts with the back page, the eye catchers page. So the front of the book and the back of the book are very, very important. And there would be clients who would say, oh, but I want to be nowhere but except in the well. I said, yeah, but a 500 crore company, if it's acquired something, will be in the front of the book. If there's something about a lifestyle, it's in the back of the book. And if it is not to do with topicality, but analysis, then it is in the front of the book, in the middle of the book. So these are just tools. And I think it is job for us to be able to explain to clients how different mediums work, and which also means for agencies to understand how different mediums work. Many of us may be coming better from print journalism, and we are also navigating the digital world, which is a two-way conversation. If a website, if a client handle already has, I don't know, 50K following, they have 50K subscribers. So what are they doing about their own magazine content? And how are they studying engagement is also very important to see. And third party endorsement, you can't negate that. I'm sorry. Everybody needs a testimonial, a validation, a recognition, that sweet surprise that someone else has noticed it, be it an award, be it an invitation to a forum to speak about, be it an article being written about. Third party always makes us understand ourselves better. Yeah.
I think you've kind of hit on a lot of questions right there, Parina, but we will come back to that. But I think what's interesting is you talked about books, right? And Vinita, I wanted to pose this to you.
Again, losing you,
Sorry,
Rinaldi.
Melanie, you're buffering again.
Just
Sorry, just a few seconds.
Going.
That you have of the work that
This is
better?
This is just slow-mo. We just have to wait.
Go ahead, Melanie, ask your question. Yeah.
Better?
Oh, she's fading.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what is going on.
It's okay, relax.
I will
switch off your video.
Okay, I'm going to switch I'll switch my Wi-Fi. Sneha, you can continue. But if you can answer till then, Vinita, I wanted to know if you considered publishing a book.
Sorry?
Have you
considered
publishing
a book?
Oh my God, I have a million stories, and some of them I have to actually sign some contracts to make sure I can publish those stories. But if I do publish a book, it's gonna be a killer. Let me tell you, like there's gonna be heads rolling under the table. Maybe my head first.
Yeah, but it'll be really nice to see it.
But on work, it's been 33 years, and I said this when I finished 25 years, and then I said it again when I'm 30 years, and possibly say it again when I do 35 years, that yes, there's enough content and great material to publish a book. And, I'm not going to say no. It's just that I need to take out that much of time to put stuff together. I would love to do it. Not for anybody else. I always do things for myself. And I would love to just do it for myself.
Give us an issue editor of a magazine till then. At least you can enjoy that in little parts then.
I think that's a good idea. No, but it's actually, I love magazines. At some point, I think I love hard copies of magazines. I'm so old school. This whole flicking of this magazine or this book is for me heartwarming. And like Parina said, I would love a testimonial even today from the editor of a magazine. I feel really excited if somebody calls and says, well, if a good magazine calls and says, can we publish you? I think it's really important. It's really important to me, whether I'm digitally out there on a daily basis or not. But if you get that little bit of applause from from a magazine or editor, somebody you respect. And I think it's, for me, that is still hugely valuable. And
really the respect, right? The most important thing is they should have that respect for clients to want that.
Yeah, you know, and like Josh said, that, you know, the magazines and the publications, you would actually keep them. I still have, I think, a huge pile of magazines with my work published over the years, and it's a part of my library. I love that. I'll be really sad if that moves away. Then possibly I just have to make my own book.
Tangible physical quality and that print quality. We have clients we work with which have artworks they only really want in print because they don't think that online can do it justice. You can't reproduce that image on screen, and that's never going to change, I don't think. But in terms of third parties and third parties sort of justifying your work or giving you credit, I still feel that editors often have a lot more value than influencers, and I know you can have this argument forever, but do you not feel that part is changing, and that certain influencers now are getting the same level of sort of cachet and the same value that major editors perhaps had in the past, or at least it's going in that direction?
But the thing is with influencers, Farina, with influencers, if you talk about influencers, and you know, there's so much of sponsoring today, you don't even know the honesty of it. You know, it's an advertisement. So what do you say to that? I mean, if I want to promote something, or I walk into a store personally, and I'm telling you this, you've seen this over the past so many years. If I love something, I will put it out there in a heartbeat, without anything, nobody prompting me, nothing. And a lot of times when I get invited for a showing or something and I'm not interested in it, I keep my phone in my pocket and I walk out. I don't care. But with influencers, it's a part of their bread and butter. It's the economy. They need it. I think at some point, I mean, they make money off it, right? So what do you say to that?
I think, Vinita, the good influencers always keep a balance of investing into their own organic content so that they're giving enough value back to their followers and why they're there in the first place. And then they put in the content which will be helping brands. Yes, they may probably market a brand which may look better in a picture than it is on quality. I'm not saying that market doesn't exist. So that's an awareness phase, and the customer eventually may get the first eyeballs, they'll get the first 20 orders to 100 orders. The repeat order will only come in terms of what the brand value is. So I think today brands, that the profusion of brands which is happening, you hence see where there were 10, there are 100 in a category. They will always be a shakeout, and they will be those which will sustain and remain. So I do think that, you know, today, unfortunately or interestingly, that we are going back to what I call the mohalla way of reading, you know, little neighborhoods and little communities. So while it looks like the world has become this one big connected universe, I feel world has really gone back to the digital word of mouth, if I may say so. It's about your 20 people and those 20 people telling you something, and then those 20 people telling you something, because there's just so much of content. How many Insta stories can you browse? How many Insta posts can you see? How much of reading can you do and do other things? Which means eventually you come down to a certain amount of discovering something new. You go, there's a new restaurant which is open. So you're hopping new restaurant, but you go back to your old favorite. So I may discover 2 new influencers each time, but I'll continue going back to, as a loyalist, to follow you. And that kind of an engagement is so easy to track in the digital world, which is what I love about the media. You can't bullshit around it beyond a point, because brands can do the analytics so quickly. You can immediately see what is the traction you got, and hey, this performance marketing. So if it doesn't work, just put that money into advertising digitally. So it's a fascinating world wherein data is meeting intuition in very interesting ways.
Yeah, I couldn't believe. I mean, I completely agree, because I mean, I get asked this question also from clients who I work with. You know, how is it important for me as a young brand, because I work with a lot of young entrepreneurial brands across different spaces. One of the first questions they ask me is, should I just start with ads right away? And yeah, I mean, I have to be honest with them and say, no, it's not just about ads anymore. You have to start with the foundation first. Start telling your story first and connect with people directly. And then maybe work towards, pushing your monies in, and then we can figure out growing a community, growing that close-knit community. I think
there's an interesting point I feel to that. In the
Yeah.
traditional marketing, we call them the 4 Ps, right?
Yeah.
You have to have the product, then price, then place, and then promotion.
Yeah.
Today, and then came the biggest P, which everybody's talking about, is purpose. But
Yeah.
sometimes what's also happening is that everybody's so busy talking about the purpose. But I said, but where is the product? I understand you have the sustainable purpose and you have so much purpose, and the purpose is really coming out of my ears. But can I please see?
Yeah, it's murky. The product is murky. Yeah.
So it's sort of interesting. We used to tell people, you have covered the 4 Ps, now focus on the 5th P. And now when people walk in, I say, yeah, I'm going to listen to your purpose, but can I please see your product?
Tell me your product. Let me shop for your product.
Because you scratch the surface, but I have this intention, it'll come later. I said,
Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait for that intention to get reflected first.
Yeah. So this is also interesting because, I wanted to ask you all an important question, because very increasingly it has become the norm now to, to think really strategically about how you want to position your personal brand, or for that matter, your family business or your eponymous brand. Do you think it is high time that this be a part of our education now? I mean, in any case, it seems to be the norm. It seems to be, that direct approach is, and it's also an easy thing to do, right? You just set up an Instagram page or a Pinterest account or a LinkedIn account, and then you work towards it. But doesn't it make sense to include marketing, to include strategy, to include branding as part of design education in a way? Vinita and Josh, what are your thoughts here?
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I never really thought about it in that sort of direct sense. I suppose it would be. It's increasingly a part of our everyday life, and everyone brands themselves to some degree. Everyone's got whether it's a LinkedIn or an Instagram account. I don't know. I don't know whether it needs to be. I don't know whether the skills are necessarily that different from sort of broader design education skills, unless you want to go directly into it as a career and work in social media. I think for the average person, it's probably more important in this space to learn sort of their traditional design skills, and then they can show themselves through Instagram. Is Instagram going to be around forever if you're just learning Instagram skills as a new platform in 2 years' time, etc.? I mean, if you look at what Vinita's done, you've created an amazing platform, but I'm sure you'd say a lot of the work that's gone into it and a lot of the understanding the visuals and the skills is your design background and being a great designer and talking honestly about your own work and your life. So yeah, I guess I've gone full circle on myself. I don't think it's necessary if you want to say that.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with him. I think it can be, when you're really out there and you are getting at that space that you want somebody to be part of your team, whether internally or externally, you sort of do a refresher, or there's a Google out there, there's learning tools are fully out there if you want to really know, and at least it is not a tangible thing. I think tangible skills are so much more in the sense that if you have to actually craft something, if you have to design something, you have to go out there and do that education. This is the kind of an education which is ready at your fingertip when you want to do it as maybe a little refresher course, or to be educated before you hire a team on what is it that you should look for. I think it's much more important to first be focused on what you want to be. And I fear that if it goes into design education, more people will only want to focus on marketing instead of getting the language. Yeah, it could be a disservice maybe.
Yeah,
fair enough. Marketing is a skill, and if you're really interested in that direction, you would sort of pick it up, more organically, and then study towards it. While we study design and while we need to know what we want to be and how we want to see ourselves, and basically academically study and learn, that is a totally different aspect. And then you get into marketing as a skill, if that's the direction you want to take. I don't think I mean, if it was a program, you know, and if you're offered a program or it's a part of a curriculum in a classroom, it needs to be a very small part of, okay, this is how you put yourself out there, that sort of direction, but not, I don't know whether a lot of people even would be interested in, you know, I think, you know, it's an offer, yes, it's just, but it's like you now you can go into various polytechnics and learn different skills. I don't know whether it needs to be a part of your studies as such.
And it could be part of visiting faculties with case study presentations, which is an excellent way for you to, which is anyway taught in these schools. So I don't know how design education works, but yeah, case studies could be a great way to just sort of have that awareness, but not really in the curriculum.
I guess a good analogy is looking at, obviously, any successful businessman needs to be good at finances and things, and some design courses probably have a small section on how to manage your sort of inventory and invoicing and all, but it's not necessarily something that needs to be taught across the board. These sort of additional soft skills get picked up when they're needed, or you use an agency.
So if I can just chime in, I think what happens, a lot of designers, what they struggle with is in design school, is that they're taught design and they're taught the craft of design, but they're not taught the business of design. And so a lot of students come out and they struggle with establishing their own studio. So I think marketing is still like a step further, right? If you haven't established your own practice and you're not being taught how to set up a business for yourself, marketing would be the next step. But I also wanted to introduce the idea or question the idea of looking at non-traditional or digital tools for marketing and branding, right? What kind of value do things like speaking opportunities or, you know, presenting yourself in certain situations and opportunities and awards and competitions, what kind of value does that hold? Because today I feel like everyone runs to social media, right? That's the go-to. It's easy, it's accessible, it's controllable by you yourself. But what about some of the other tools that are available out there? Purina, would you like to address this?
No, I mean, when I watch, I think it's a question of these tools are definitely important. I don't think that, you know, whether it be for somebody, a platform like LinkedIn may work very well. For somebody else, it may be networking on going for those specific times where everybody of the industry or the new people that you are there are out there. It also comes to a little bit of what is the scale of the organization and where you want to be. So for example, I don't know if I was setting up an agency, am I already coming with an expertise and I have a roster of clients already? So it sort of works and then you go out there to really network. Or if you're going there to gain business. So it really comes from your purpose. Are you going there to gain business or are you going there to insights and networking? And how do you really balance the two? Anything which happens about purely on networking, you'll definitely get the business in the door, but you'll still need to at the back end be able to steer that ship and lead that business because, you know, that is the thing. I mean, I personally am very bad with it. So I'm not the right person. I just tend to forget about things or I get so busy with the client forums. But I do think that industry forums carry a lot of value because, you know, you meet a certain community of people and you can, and I don't mean to say just PR to PR, but if it's even an AD design show or it's a art show or it's these are industry forums which will be far more valuable to me maybe than just pure marketing and public relations B2B forums.
Yeah, I certainly think speaking opportunities are very important, and it's something I love sort of pushing a lot of our clients to and encouraging them to do. And speaking in front of a room of people, you can capture their attention and really tell a story. You might get a great article, but it doesn't mean someone's going to read the whole thing. They flick through it, they flip over the page. If you've got 50 people in front of a room and you've got an opportunity that are already engaged in what you're doing, you've got an opportunity to really convert them and really sell them on your story. And especially in these areas like design and art, where you're not selling quick commodities. You're selling a longer term project or a vision. It's a whole architectural project. It's a painting you've been working on for months, and it's a slower process anyway. Awards, I find awards very watered down with paying for content and favors to certain people, a little bit like what Vinita was saying about social media. And I'm sure people disagree with me, and I'm sure people come in and say, no, this award's great, that award's great. I've never been a huge fan of them personally.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's not a problem at all. Just going on from there, we wanted to ask each one of you, are there certain brands or certain people who you follow or who you look up to, who you feel have the most compelling stories to tell because of their brand? And this is also, of course, outside of Instagram and outside of maybe your clientele as well. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be Instagram-driven brands only, because let's say we've been talking about outside of not just the digital space, but outside of it too. Are there people or companies or brands who you find inspiring and who you feel have compelling stories to tell?
I think it'll also be interesting for our audience to look up some of these people that, some of these brands that you share with us as case studies or examples.
I would love to know who Vinita follows. I go there and the brands which I admire, I go and see who they follow, and then that leads me to a great universe, and I absolutely love that. Because
let's start with you, Vinita.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. No, but you know what I'm really, what I'm really enjoying on following is my visit to the museums. Digitally, I am obsessed by walking through a museum or an art show or this recent Sotheby's auction, or I get so excited by that. So that is something which I kind of look forward to. But in terms of marketing, I don't think there's a bigger genius than Sabyasachi. And Farina, you can take a lot of credit there. I can see all the magazines, every single magazine. And then Josh, look what she's done with every single magazine cover. Who is the influencer here?
The combination of the influence of two powerful brands, the magazine and the brand.
Yeah, that was a really amazing feat, by the way, to do that. And I don't think any other brand has managed to do it before. Yeah.
Disruption is the name of the game for everything, right? Some work and some don't. I don't have a problem with paid marketing, but let it be known to people that it's paid. I have a bigger problem with where I don't understand it's paid or unpaid. And I find that very baffling. It's a paid, right? Listen, advertising builds iconism. I used to I started my career with A&M magazine, which was one of the most respected niche magazines. And I would go around doing case studies on Hero Cycles and Amul Butter and Titan and Tanishq and, all these iconic brands. Advertising builds them, right? We still wake up wanting to, whether it destroys or sparks a dialogue, whether it be a Fab India controversy over the new thing, whether it be diversity, inclusivity, everything. Advertising is a reflection of the times that we look at. So I like advertising to be clean, to be told it's an ad, whether it be a two-way interface, because obviously in digital, the ad will look in a different way. But I have a problem with advertorials which mimic to be editorial. That's a big problem for me, because you can call it an advertorial. It's okay. You're trying to say what you want to say as a brand. But this thing of calling, and I think that's where one of the reasons that Indian media got into trouble is because they just did it the wrong way because of that. And I don't think globally it happens like that at all. Yeah, I said it.
Josh, what about you?
I've been told by so many magazines recently saying that our cover is a paid page. And even though your image could be better than what the cover. It is now. It's just a marketing page, but it doesn't come out as a marketing page. It comes out as their cover.
Yeah, but Vinita, what happens is, I think in luxury sometimes it's a world of exclusion by. So somebody may have the money and be able to put it on every cover, but magazines sometimes don't do it. You still have to be a little bit in an insider's club. So for example, you still have to have a certain kind of a value. So if you're I don't know, a Cartier or a Chanel or a Bottega or a Armani or a Gucci, you still have to be a Gucci, right? You still have to have that credibility and a trust.
Yeah.
Something. And you could be, and I think magazines do put in a lot of younger independent talent by mixing up things, because eventually they will lose their core customer otherwise. But when magazines start losing that balance, they will eventually lose the readership, because people walk away. As you said, there are the serials internationally. There will be a platform magazine in India, and a good advertiser would value both, because they know that they can get a cover placement, but they still want a magazine which carries some. So global brands do paid covers, but they still don't sacrifice it at the case of not having a great product and a brand first. So that's for Indian media to not really give in to substandard product which they have to put on a cover. Ask more. Tell them we are willing to give it to you, but you got to deserve it and work a little bit harder for me to give it. Don't just do it for money. Take the money and then make them elevate to give you a better product.
If I can share the flip side of this, and this is a true story, I've been asked, I've gotten calls on multiple occasions where designers have said that, put me on the cover and I'll give you the work. Otherwise I wouldn't, right? So it's interesting because it works both ways. And for us, it was always about, we don't do covers. We don't do projects on covers. Our covers are conceptual. So, that was just a standard answer. But they are willing to, do that. Or we've had designers who've come to us and say, I will only give you my work if it's going to be an exclusive story, or if it's going to be positioned in this page, or if it's going to be across so many pages. So it kind of works both ways. There's a little bit of a seesaw over there as well. But just coming back to something that, Prerna, you said earlier, and you kind of mentioned the Fab India controversy. And I just wanted to ask this question, not necessarily getting into that particular what's happened there, but a lot of people raise their eyebrows, right? And a lot of people ask, and Josh, I'm sure this is something that is very, very sort of pertinent in the art world, especially, is that are controversies, or do controversies become marketing tools? Or are they used as marketing tools today? Maybe some insider's information from you guys. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, they are. I don't think that can necessarily be denied. They probably shouldn't be. Once a controversy has happened, at that point, what do you then decide to go on and do? Do you try and take advantage of it or not? I think that's a question that has to be discussed on a case-by-case basis. And I think it definitely happens. There's times when I think it's probably the right thing to do. There's times when I probably advise someone not to do it. Sorry, that was quite a sort of political answer, not saying what I meant to be saying, but I think it really depends on it, very much a case-on-case point of what had happened and how you're taking advantage of it.
I mean, really, art is meant to provoke, right? So you can do it the right way also. So if you want to capture on a particular trend, or you feel that you want to make a point, do it boldly with authenticity as an artist. Say, I want to provoke a reaction. I want to put my view out there. But when you're doing it, jumping from one cause to the other, I mean, I don't know, you lose
I would
your voice.
actually say, in that case, if you're doing it authentically, it's not a controversy, it's a provocation, which is required, right? And especially in the creative world. But I'm talking about a controversy where you're doing it knowingly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big question that a lot of people have today, is that, are people doing this? Are they unjustly creating controversy in order to be, in order to gain the numbers?
Yeah, probably. Again, it's not happening. I wouldn't advise it. Where you say the difference between controversy and a provocation, I think artists provoking people and things has always happened. And it's great. It's part of a lot of really good art. But where you're creating controversy just to get numbers, I think you'll be found out at some point. You might get numbers immediately, but you won't be able to retain those numbers. You won't be able to retain those users unless you're just becoming increasingly more controversial, and then it goes off in another tangent. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone doing it. I think the difference is where a controversy has happened by mistake, where you then use that to try and get numbers. And again, I think that can be acceptable at times, as long as that's not, you're not creating controversy just for the sake of making a noise.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of these cases, but we've actually got a couple of questions that are coming in, if I may pull those in. Someone's asking, what would be your advice to young designers or young design businesses to build their brand? Perhaps all of you can address this, from your own perspectives. Vanita, would you like to give some advice to some young ones?
To build their brand?
To build their own brand.
Build their own brand, yeah.
For me, the first thing is you need to be, there's a sense of clarity on what you're doing and what is your path, what is your style, where you're coming from, where you're heading. And that's really difficult because it's a process of evolution. So building a brand is, I think, is if you really know where you're heading and take that forward into sort of then putting it out there or going in that direction, that would help you to build your brand. Digitally, I have no idea. So I'm just telling you, honestly, I don't have any idea. But and like I said, my path is completely old school. Started one way with commercial, went on to residential, and now I'm only doing residential. So it's been a long process. And what I was doing when I started out and what I'm doing right now is completely unimaginable. I didn't even realize that I would stay there for so long. So I think somebody who has studied a little more about how to build a brand is better than me to answer this.
We also have someone who's asking, and this is interesting, that why did you feel the need to suddenly, emerge on social media and take it by storm? You've been working and everyone's known you. Vanita Chaitanya has been a brand before she even came onto Instagram. So what prompted you to do that?
I actually came onto Instagram to follow. I came onto Instagram because at some point the kids at home said, maybe you'll be interested. And then I started following people and people who I was interested in and I was excited by, and be it design, be it fashion, be it politics. And that's how I came on. And when I started, it was a little bit of a fumble because I wasn't sure about what I needed to post and whether I should just post work. And what I'm doing now is, again, completely different over the last 4 years. I realized that I want to say stuff. I realized that I can help people learn things. I can actually, I don't know, I can actually give people a bigger insight into lifestyle, into, like Karina says, botanicals. She one time said, "Oh my God, this is what you do. I love this myself," and we started talking about it. But what it's done to me personally, and how it switched me up is also amazing, because I've started interacting on a daily basis with some amazing people, and I've made the most incredible friends. When I was out recently in London, I met people who, they reached out to me from various parts, like, this lady from South Africa. She just said, "No, I'm coming over, let's have tea, let's have dinner." It went on to different topics. I met somebody who was in London for the last 15 years, who I never even thought, I mean, in a different design category, I never even thought that I could go and sit and have breakfast with them. I mean, it's just helped me personally in incredible ways. So why I came onto social media, I don't know. I mean, I came to follow, but if I'm able to inspire on a daily basis, I'm happy to do so. That's all.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Coming to the advice that you would give a young designer or a young and upcoming brand, doesn't necessarily have to be design. It could be anyone who wants to make their presence felt on a digital platform. So Josh and Parina, what is that advice that you would give them?
Not necessarily just on a digital platform, but take opportunities and put yourself out there. Stick to your brand. Don't break your brand values. Stick to your values and your brand, but take those opportunities. I've heard people in the past say, just focus on your brand and stick to your brand. And I think you have to realize that you have to go and put it out there and be willing to put it on a platform for other people to see. And take those risks, take those opportunities, whether it's Instagram, whether it's talking at an event, just do take those opportunities to push it, and don't think I'll wait till the brand's a bit more defined. I'll wait till I've got a few more sales, etc. Just go for it.
I completely agree with Josh on that. You know, one of the big things I've been noticing, and I don't think that will happen. We see, because there are a certain amount of generation of brands which have been in the middle of transitioning from one medium to the other. A lot of them have shunned the new media as a result, to saying, I don't need it, which is fine if you want to be a boutique little brand, which people are knocking on the door and doing a by appointment. It's your brand choice. And it's also the question of what kind of a life cycle of a brand, or what kind of a age and experience you want to be in. What I find disappointing sometimes in India is that so many beautiful, iconic brands just wither away because they just did not make the effort to get the storytelling of what they reflect in the physical world into the digital world. They don't do it. Because when they make a mess of it, it's your living room, guys. I mean, you were telling me that when I come to your showroom, the flowers will be perfectly in place. And, you know, there'll be this person who's going to welcome you in, and we have old world values. That's all very fine. But if you're going to put an ad out there on Instagram, jewelers, I mean, so many of them, we've seen them, so many products, don't do it then. You know, let it be, but don't do that, because, you know, it just pains me. I can't name brands because it just feels bad to do so, but iconic Indian jewelers, iconic Indian, let's say, people who are into product design, 20 years ago, they may have been the name that you refer to. They're still big, but they just do it so badly. Why do you do it? Don't do it then. Figure out your thing, but it's lazy, and don't become cynical. You know, all of us grow older, all of us feel if you can't adapt, then don't. Find a way to go to what you're comfortable with. But cynicism doesn't help any of us. You know, that's the one thing I would say.
I couldn't agree with you more, Parina. I think the keyword there was adapting to different platforms, adapting to your story.
If you don't like something, right? Sadhya doesn't have a personal profile page. He's a great speaker. He has charisma, but he lets his brand speak for himself. We don't go around often seeing him voice his own opinions on Instagram. He doesn't have an Instagram handle. I can vouch for that. Half the time we have to send it to him offline. The man doesn't use email IDs. We all know that. But he is connected to the voice of the millennials. If he got onto Instagram, I remember being in the car and constantly there was this young girl working with us at that time. He would just see her face and run away in the other direction because she'll keep going, telling him Instagram, 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 Instagram. And he'll be like, what is wrong with all of you? I said, Sadhya, it is simple. But for him, it's not about, again, I said, don't confuse the medium for the message. There is a team which he invested in, which brands don't do, even if they have larger presence. So you sort of say, if I'm going to put myself out there at every level, it has to be beautiful. You don't have to do everything yourself. But cynicism, I think, destroys many things. That's one thing I would tell young people not to do.
And if you're not going to put yourself out there, you don't get the feedback that's so important to develop and change. Sure, you might get a lot of pointless criticism or hate on, hopefully you don't, but people get it on Instagram and things, but you also get valuable feedback. And it's a platform where people can genuinely give you insightful, useful feedback that can help your career or your designs?
You know, the best truth is in the comments, right? We can follow a picture of Sabya or Vinita or an artist, but it's the comments. I mean, yes, there'll be some hate mail, blah, 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 but it gives you, it's for you to decide what you want to do with the insights. You may say that, okay, this is a lot of the time the audience which is out there may not be the audience which actually buys your brand. Maybe they are the ones who look at it and engage, but they don't comment. It's interesting. I think we just cannot dismiss that it's interesting to see a two-way conversation and get comfortable with it.
I think this
it's an opportunity.
Apocryphal anecdote that I got told not that long ago by someone, but Omer's never advertised. And that's why they're so great. And I think just taking that attitude is quite arrogant, just saying, we're so great, we don't need to advertise, we don't need to put ourselves out there, you'll come and find us. And it doesn't work.
But Josh, they are so wrong, because when they say that, and everybody said, oh, Chanel would never get into e-commerce. I said, oh, really? Chanel is into e-commerce. Chanel was one of the first companies to advertise on Twitter because they told you that Twitter should be there. Cartier, I've represented Cartier for a decade. Of course, there are things in high jewelry which will do the high jewelry way, but are you really telling me they don't invest into Instagram and storytelling?
Exactly.
All of these legacy brands are moving in that direction now.
They lead the market till date. Look at what Balenciaga is doing on red carpet. I mean, they're wiping the slate clean with every show.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to say, oh, they do it, so I can do it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. You're still building a little bit of people to know who you are. If you're going to wipe it every 15 days, I don't really know if that works. So it's interesting, you know. Yeah.
So in light of all of this, are we saying that the work doesn't necessarily speak for itself? You have to have someone speak for it?
No, you just have to put the work out there, I think, is the easiest answer to that. The work should speak for itself. You have to stick to your brand value, philosophy, core identity, but within that, put that out there.
So communication.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be you talking, but your work has to be out there. So yes, if you're not good with talking, get somebody professional to do it for you, who reflects your brand value, but at least put the work out there. And don't put it out there shoddily, then don't put it out there. Like, just don't. Consumers catch on to everything.
Vinita, any last words? We are running out of time, but we'd like to wrap up a little bit. With any advice, any last words, any insights?
Let me think. So, Parina, you need to probe me a little bit over here. Tell me what you all want to know. I don't even know how much to speak about this.
I think one of the things which people are, I think there are one or two other questions which I felt I would love to know from both of you. Somebody asked me that please repeat the 5th P again, which is fine. It was product, place, promotion. But then someone said, is there a sequence on what's to be a priority? Vinita, we both are on the other side where we consult brands, but you are the brand in this room. Is there a priority or a sequence for you in terms of how you look at the most important value when you're building a brand today? Is it product orientation? Is it really your purpose? How do you look at your prioritization in a business decision?
Today, it's all about my reputation, my ethic, my ethos. That's my brand. And I feel that I need to keep pushing myself to better my brand. So if I'm doing something, like, let's say I've walked through a house, or I've done a little reel about one part of the house, and I'm going to something else. Every day, it's about pushing myself, but I have a very strong brand value. I know what I do, and I know what is my direction. I'm very, very clear about it. And I'm very clear that I need to evolve on a daily basis. I don't know it all. Like, I'm seriously clear about that. So if that is my process and it's my learning, and if I can learn something new every day, like when I come out and I talk about a tanjoy, or I talk about something which is on my table, it's not that I knew all this while. It's come to me, I've learned about it, and I'm passing that learning on, and I'm happy to do that. I think somebody said you're very generous when you pass information out, but I mean, I think it's so important, because nobody came out. And like I used to walk into these amazing homes, and they would have these collections and collections. And I was like, for me at age of 25, 30, I was like, this is like a temple. Like literally, there's too much going on over here. And then now I'm trying to do in my own, my own interpretation of what I think would look nice. And I've sort of mixed a whole bunch of things put together. But because I've understood it, so I'm very clear on where I want to go and my path. And again, it's because I've had so much of experience, and there's that much of knowledge. And I think all you need to do is learn, study, gain as much as you can on a daily basis. I learned today. I've learned from both of them. I had no idea. I wouldn't ask those questions. I thank you for inviting me over here. Because though my daughter dabbles in marketing, well, not dabbles, she's got her little firm, but she's going to whack me after this. But, I've never asked these questions. So, I'm just happy to be here.
Great. Mrinalini, anything else? Are there any more questions? Josh, do you have a question for anybody?
Josh, would you like to ask? We've actually covered our audience questions, but if there's anything you'd like to ask each other, this is your opportunity.
I don't know. I mean, the one thing that had sort of interested me in this, but we haven't really touched on, is this idea of branding and creating a brand. I think one of the challenges we have between an artist and a designer, and where for a designer, you're allowed to create a brand and call it a brand. And Verena, you were talking earlier about that brand sort of going on to the next generation, or a company going on to the next generation. Whereas with an artist, it feels slightly different, because it almost invariably won't go on to another generation. It's that singular individual. And that word brand becomes a little dirty. And it's very much about sort of more about their core identity. And I'd be interested to hear sort of perhaps your thoughts about that. And that area. I guess as an agency, we probably work more with artists, and you probably work more with brands.
No, I mean, yeah, we do work with artists. There's an art and culture division, but not as specialized as you. We probably work more on the platforms to promote art and culture. Yeah. We just did the Bihar Biennale with the government. We're working on Chhattisgarh now. We did Orcha Festival. But I think what's interesting is really what is legacy. So I think when you are the creator yourself, like you could be a musician, for example, you're really going to be there in your own lifetime, and you're going to move away. So legacy in terms of, and I find that interesting, because once an artist is gone, the evaluation or the valuation of the artist keeps going up, up, and up, according to who benefits from that legacy. Are they creating the path of what Vinita has spoken about, knowledge, and what are they leaving for the next generations? I think that is very, very important, what artists can do. Are they investing into public museums? Are they creating projects which are not just about sort of expressing their own creativity, but also doing things with the environment that they live in? I think luxury brands globally do that a lot, about partnering with artists so that, a certain kind of an ecosystem of design can be shared with a larger thing. Nothing fulfills an artist more than being able to do something which a public can savor, right? Yeah. And I think if in their lifetime, artists are doing those collaborations in the right way, they leave back a legacy which enriches them, and they can see that within a living lifetime itself. What have you done on a restoration program? What are you doing to be part of grassroots empowerment, or maybe training programs with the younger artisans or craftsmen? Like we see that in fashion design a lot, right? The whole conversation has been happening on who's an artist, who's a craftsman, and who's a designer. So I think it's interesting where to see how our artists really brands is when they are passing on the knowledge, and they're working on preservation, restoration, and what they will give to the next generation. And I think that would be amazing to see how they do that. So for me, that's how they are brands then.
Yeah, and I don't disagree at all. I think it just becomes, it feels like there's more of a block there, the way they can sort of present themselves, not in terms of them individually, but how that's perhaps viewed by the rest of the community or people?
Yeah, there's only that much of art can be savored when it is locked up behind private doors. It's great. It's for a private collector. But the best art is when you can go out there and walk into a museum and savor it. The best art is if you're going across to a public gallery in a garden, and there is something which can provoke people, which people can rejoice and be a part of your everyday life. So I think that's where art becomes brand.
It certainly should be.
Thank you so much. I think on that note, and on that very last note, art becoming a brand at the end of the day, wanted to thank each and every one of you for participating in such an insightful discussion. Vinita, Josh, and Parina, thank you for such an insightful discussion on building a brand.
Thank you for having
and
us.
beyond just a brand. Thank you so much. We hope to see you tomorrow as well, where we have day 2 with three very interesting panels on pit stops and changing tracks and changing careers, talking about our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, and our mistakes, and whether we live to work or we work to live. So it's going to be an interesting Friday night. It's going to be philosophical for sure. It's going to be intersectional and another dimension for sure. So we hope to see you tomorrow as well. We have Marianne Udajan, we have Kunal Bhatia, Samir Kulavur, Suzanne, we have Anthony Lopez, Anne Furwood, Vaishali S. We have Sarah Fotheringham from Safamasi. We have Azan Kambata, Suman Jaykrishnan, and Sarah Sham. So very diverse panel tomorrow too. And the three of you are welcome as well. You can be a part of the discussion because it's going to be open and fluid. We're really looking forward to it tomorrow. We hope to see you all tomorrow as well. Thank you. And that concludes a very productive and a very insightful and inspiring day 1. We hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Everybody. Take care. Bye, Josh. Bye, Vinita. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you to our entire audience on social media as well. We've had more than 600 people on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. So please tune in tomorrow as well. Thank you all. Have a good night.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
We are Godrej. That's us. In ruby, green, and blue. And this is a story of the little things we do. It started with a little We are Godrej.